Oh. Let's see. Does this working? Dr. Clark probably has one charge of iron brew at the ready. Well, a fire extinguisher on iron brew would be a waste of iron brew. Honestly, if a fire extinguisher was going to be on with iron brew, I would be using it for other things. Right then. Is this all working? Can you all hear me? That's the important thing. Nice shirt. So I'm presuming it's working. Right then, I'm going to turn the chat off on the screen. And it's going to continue going on there. So yes. Okay, I'll be watching the chat on there. So if you see my eyes going across, they're over there. Hello Tony, hello Jeff, hello Greg, hello Kingsrook, hi Paul. Hello everyone. Right then, so I have some cool books to start off chatting with today. I do. Some very cool books. As usual, the chat function isn't disappearing at all on this thing. It's just me and Steam Labs are just going to have fun forever. Eventually, though, soon, as I get through the book, it's going to be proper gaming PC down here and doing this all properly. Hello, Brock from in Southwest Ohio. Yes. I should point out that you have a slightly extended Bru Ships potentially today because I have an unopened bottle, 2-litre bottle of iron brew, and 1 litre left in a bottle of iron brew. So theoretically, whatever 3 litres of iron brew can get us. I'm also going to start off slightly differently. In that there has recently been a couple of articles come out about the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, the RNLI. Hi, Daniel and Surrey. Now, I have said they are a charity. They are not a emergency service. Emergency service is an organisation run by a government paid for through taxation. The Royal National Lifeboat Institution is a charity. Yes, they take care of you. Yes, they provide certain services, but they are a charity. So, when I see articles in the Daily Mail critiquing them for not running lifeguards or the things they pay for out of those charitable donations in times like this, the current sort of coronavirus and these sort of issues, it is a charity which is operating under the rules of a charity, not a government institution. There are different sets of health and safety criteria. So, Mr. Daily Mail, please get it right and stop calling them emergency service and judging them and comparing them to the police and the nurses and the ambulances and all those people, because it's a different criteria. Unless you want to start paying for them through taxation and make them an emergency service, leave them be. Okay? Now, I have critique with many papers. Me and papers, I will use them when they get things right, and sometimes I will tell them when they get things wrong. I think I've even been published once in the Daily Mail, so this is not a general critique of papers. This is just a critique of that scenario. Stop making a fuss about the RNLI. They're a charity. Okay? Thank you. Right. Back to the saying hellos. So, hello, Night Heron Production. Glad you can hear me. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Steve. Hi, Brock, I've already said. Hi, Ian Carr. Hi, Michael Rose. You're going to be hearing of some more books today that your Amazon account has never heard of. Daniel Freeman. Daniel Freeman, in the nicest way, the amount of iron brew I've drunk in my life, yeah, it ain't getting there. To Joyce 1971. Hi, Dr. Clark. Nice to get you watch live. Usually I'm working during live stream. Thank you. And thank you for watching. Thank you for, come and listen. Good afternoon, Blue Shirt Butter. Good afternoon to New York. King's Rook. Steve, got Wings of Gold by Asta. Ooh, good choice. Right then. Stephanie Wilson, unfortunately there will never be much of a backlash on the DM because they like to have the attention. It helps boost sales. But I still felt in the nicest way on this one drawn enough to say something. Because I like the RNLI. And my own rather paltry experience has been, as many of you possibly know for some of the pictures around the web about me, I am a sea kayaker. I would never consider myself an expert sea kayaker, although I have been doing it for about, must be bordering on 20 odd years. And I do it mostly off the coast of Cornwall when I go down there on my family holidays, but I have done it elsewhere. And I basically know enough to know when I look out to sea whether or not I should go out, and I also check the weather charts whether or not I have the skill to go out in that particular weather, or whether it's even sensible. I have quite often met people out on a kayak, and they have been waving their things frantically at me, and usually it goes by this: I do this all the time on my local river. I don't know why I'm getting into trouble at sea. It's because it's very different at sea than on your local river. I do a little bit of river kayaking as well, not as much as I've done sea kayaking, and I can honestly say the two scenarios are incredibly different. So I have a big love for the RNLI and for all they do. I also have a big love and big recommendation that if you are going to go out sea kayaking or any form of kayaking, put your mobile phone in a waterproof case. Paul from Chicago. Do people canoe the Canal Network? Yes, they do. You can canoe or kayak the Canal Network, and it's really quite fun. I've done a bit of that as well. Strub, I am not going to release that particular message from being hidden, but I do understand where it's coming from and agree. But I happen to know that this particular broadcast is being watched by a couple of 11-year-olds and possibly a 9-year-old in terms of some of my extended family cousins, so I am very careful about what gets released on the Sunday afternoon ones. Right then, so books. Okay, today is going to be a bit of a Naval Aviation themed book review, and then we'll get into general questions. And I wanted to start off with this one, this little weird and wacky book. It's called Combat Aircraft Designer, the Ed Hyman story, written by Ed Hyman and Rosario Russo. It is amazing. It's one of those books which I tracked down when I was doing my PhD, and it formed quite a large section of what became my PhD because it was a designer's first-hand approach to explaining how they designed aircraft. And it was really cool, all the stuff this guy got up to. And, you know, it came with me to many things, including Churchill College archives and all sorts of places to explain stuff. So it's a really, really cool book. And it's something to read if you're interested at all in any aircraft design. Yes, he did design the A4. There's a list of the aircraft he designed in here, and frankly, it's just amazing. Some of the aircraft he worked on: B-17, B-25, B-26, B-29, B-36, B-66. Oh, good Lord. The patents he has numbered, the speeches and articles and what he's talked about. He was responsible for the SBD Dauntless, the DB-7 Boston, A-20 Havoc, A-24 Attacker Bomber, A-26 Invader, Sky Raider, Devastator, Sky Streak, Sky Rocket, Sky Knight, Sky Shark, Sky Warrior. He likes Sky in the name of his aircraft. And just so many. This is a really, really good book if you're interested in aircraft design. I have read it many times, and it's lovely. Hi, Paul. Yeah, thank you. I hope you're well too. A King's Rook. Okay, mandatory Canadian reference to the Alvaro Arrow. Could it have Sodor? It would have needed a redesign of its of some of its undercarriage, but if you can make a Spitfire do it, you can make pretty much anything work off a carriage if you really want to. Bull for Chicago. Jerison, it's fun and fairly easy. Read a book, then just rent a canoe on a calm day and tool around on the Yeah, canal networks are fine. Big lakes have their own currents. Fast-flowing rivers have their own currents and issues. The sea is a completely different thing. I have literally been in a sea kayak, and my family been watching from shore as I was coming in. And they didn't realise that as you got closer to shore, there's a difference in the waves. They actually get bigger. So out at sea, it looked fairly calm. And then once you're closer to the bay, it's fair enough. But there was a sort of a ridge. And so I knew what was coming. But for my family watching from shore, seeing me suddenly appearing to drop down below the level of the waves and then come up and then go down was absolutely scary as anything for my mum. She was sort of watching me go, because they were waiting for me to come in for us to go and have a lunch, and you know, it was fun. Hello, it's Francis Paul. Now, but seriously, combat aircraft designer, if you can get a copy, if you're interested in aircraft design, if you're interested in the issues of aircraft procurement in World War II and the realities and explanations of why you don't always get the aircraft you want, but you do get the aircraft you need. Yes, that is a song reference. This is good. This is very, very good. Right. Next one. And I actually have a full set of these. So, hi Potter. So I might end up going through all of them because I do have a full set. But this is Wings of the Navy by Captain Eric Winkle-Brown. Now, Winkle-Brown is a very, very special and cool guy. Basically, imagine someone with the sarcasm and wit of me and Drac, sort of halfway between the two of us. Then make him a very short Scotsman. And then tell him that he has a natural aptitude for flying, and make him the world's most prolific test pilot during the middle of a world war. That is Eric Winkle-Brown. And it shows. It really does show. One of my favourite things is the... was this one. Let's see if you can guess which aircraft he's describing. Design of any combat aircraft involves a measure of compromise, and that of the shipboard single-seat fighter perhaps more than most, as its success depends particularly heavily on the right balance being struck between the demands of combat and the dictates of the venue in which it is to spend its working life. It is essentially an amalgam of conflicting elements, a masterpiece in coalescence of the extraordinary factors called for in a fighter suited to the naval environment was, in my view, the corpulent but rugged and pugnacious little warplane, which, created by Leroy and his associates, Leon A. Swirbel and William T. Schlender, in the late 30s, was to establish famed genius Phallus. He's talking about the Grumman Wildcat. One of the cutest aircraft ever made. He goes on to describe it as a venomous-looking little bumblebee of a fighter, the Wildcat, destined to be the progenitor of a dynasty of cats, made up for its lack of aesthetic appeal in purposefulness of appearance. But pulchritude was never to be a characteristic of carrier-based single-seat fighters until the debut, some years later, of the ballerina-like Seafire, and the elegance was certainly no criterion by which a naval fighter was adjudged in late 1940, when the Wildcat began to appear in the infantry of the Fleet Air Arm. Not that we knew the portly little Grumman by that glorious emotive appellation in those days, for their lordships of the Admiralty had, in their wisdom, seen fit to bestow the singularly uninspiring name of Martlet on this first American recruit to the ranks of Britain's sea-going naval air component. It's cute. Seriously, if you want to read, and this has been reprinted several times, something which is so well written from the first book and so balanced in its appraisal and its taking on, you will never get anything quite like this. You will never get anything quite like this produced again, because no one else has had quite such a vast personal experience of flying aircraft to draw from to produce it. So, Eric Winkelbrown's Wings of the Navy is something really, if you're interested in aircraft, if you are interested in what aircraft can do and how they can be designed, you've got to go for this. And yes, I have to say I do agree with him on many of his approaches. In fact, the vast majority of them. What I loved was when I was doing my PhD thesis, I used these two books to help me design the system by which I measured the aircraft by. And that's how I built my appendices and organized things. And that's how I came to quite a lot of the conclusions I did, which other people hadn't done, because instead of comparing to land-based metrics and the land requirements, I thought, well, let's compare them as naval aircraft, what naval aircraft are required to do. And suddenly they all start to look a lot better. Now, I'm having a little bit of an argument with next author at the moment. So, before I get on to their book, I'm going to have to point out the book I'm having an argument with of theirs. Hello, you two. Do you mind moving? Thank you. Okay. You go there. And I'll move you two out of the way as well. Alright. So, all of you go there and sit on the books I'm currently using for writing. Very nicely. Behave. So, currently, I'm having an argument with this book. Norman Freeman's. The reason I'm having an argument with it is because in it he writes that the Royal Navy radars didn't have Plotplan Indicator, which if anyone knows what it doesn't know what that is, basically I would describe it as a flat radar screen. When you have a flattened circle going around, have the radar beam going around, and you show the indication of things where they are. This is wrong. Okay? I can understand why he's saying it, because many of the radars didn't have it, and it is sort of a thing. But, quite specifically, Type 276 and a couple of other types do have that facility and do have that plot. And the reason I can tell you this, and I know this is the case, is because the Royal Navy's destroyers were using it as a method to navigate and coordinate their movements at night. So, this means I'm having an argument with Freeman's book. The trouble is, Freeman does produce a lot of books, and they are vast majority very well researched, in fact always well researched, but he does work at such speed and such volume that there are, as I said before, going to be a couple of errors in there occasionally. This is an error in this one. But the trouble is, when Freeman says something, Brock Payne, yes, the British actually did invent PPI and did actually have it. It's fitting on destroyers. It's fitted on cruisers first and all sorts of things, but we won't get into that. Anyway, basically, because Norman Freeman has said this, it then means the burden of proof for me to prove it's not the case is that much higher because it's Norman Freeman who said it. So, you lot, go back there. And before anyone wonders why there is quite so much iron brew here, as well as this evening, I have decided this weekend, after my book's been extended to Monday, it's got to be in by, that I didn't like the last two chapters of my book, and actually, in fact, they make it go quite a long way over. So rather than cutting all the chapters by a bit and cutting them all down, what I'm doing is amalgamating the last two chapters into one chapter. So I've now got to write about 10,000 words before lunchtime tomorrow. There's going to be a lot of iron brew drunk. So, that brings us to this book. Fighter Sodor Fleet by Norman Freeman. Honestly, again, I liked it. But I think some points in there, Norman is very much trying to look at things from how the American Navy turns out and how the American Navy ends up approaching things by the end of the war, and saying, therefore, anything which isn't that methodology is not good, is wrong, or not as good, or not good. And I actually, having spoken with him, no, he doesn't mean it that way, but that's how it comes across. And I've spoken with him at a conference a few years back, and I had a discussion with him. So basically, what really happens is, you know, everything's relative. It's how good is your air defense and your air coordination for that time. It's fun. But no. But for its sheer volume of information contained in, and sheer huge amount, if you can get it, it's a good book. But just remember, it is very, very centric on one particular methodology. So that's enough of me critiquing Norman, because he's a good guy. Right, so now I'm going to get into the books, which frankly, quite a lot of you, knowing you, will be salivating over. This is Hawker Aircraft since 1920 by Francis K. Mason. And when it says Hawker Aircraft, it means every single Hawker aircraft. This is a beautifully put together series. And I know last week I was hunting for my Japanese book. I did actually get a message afterwards from one of the students going, I've got that, Doc, do you want it? And I went, no, you're fine. Finish your dissertation off of it. But that is why I don't currently have the Japanese Navy version of this. But I do have the US Navy, and again, my Fleet Air Arm one is loaned out to another student, I think. So, you know, I'm being too generous with my books again. I'm helping people finish their dissertations. But this is an absolutely beautiful book. And if you're interested in development of aircraft from the Hawker, there's good. But you might want to look about the Blackburns. And again, this has everything, up to and including the Blackburn Buccaneer. And all the development histories. These books are great because they have not only the story of the aircraft and the development and what they get involved in, but they have all their stats and all their vital statistics. They have plans. So if you're a modeler, if you want to model these aircraft, these sort of things, these books are brilliant. They have everything in them, and they're just lovely. They also have things like the list of how many aircraft were produced, where they served, which squadron they went to, what they did this, what they did that. It's absolutely so much detail. And all the different specification data. Fairy aircraft. Biden. This is another good one. It's always fun to look at and always fun to consider. And frankly, yeah. Again, it's the whole stuff of the swordfish. And if I give you, it's got the picture in here, I think, which I can use. Okay. This is a swordfish float plane being launched from HMS Malaya. Vickers, Dr. Clark, any hint for the cover art of your book? The cover art of my book is already on the Amazon site, I think, which is showing it off. So you can find it. Does Fairy do their own engines? No, they don't do their own engines, but it is a good-looking book still. They get mostly... Fairy mostly use Bristol engines. They really like them. What I did like about this one specifically is it does have in here somewhere... Oh, yeah. Sorry about this a second. Just me looking up for you. Yep, there it is. Okay. This is a picture of a cockpit on a Fairy swordfish. And they put in a lot of thought in that. Believe it or not, that's considered a simplified cockpit. So think about that. This is designed for night flying, so it was simplified. I would... Sure, Mac, Furry Kitten Blackburn is like the British Brewster. I would say actually Blackburn are more like the British Grumman, but they just don't get their aircraft out as often. They have more issues. And I see Daniel Freeman is talking about the Spitfire. Well, for the Spitfire, we do have a slight advantage going on here because we have Supermarine aircraft since 1914. And it's in this you really start to realise that they really are a flying boat builder. And I mean, have you met the walrus? And what's interesting is that in the 1930s, what Supermarine was known for worldwide was the Seagull and the Walrus and the other aircraft that they're producing. They were known worldwide as really good aircraft manufacturers for Navy ships, Navy catapults, and then they produced the Spitfire. But that's not their last foray into Navy planes. They do, again, come on with the Navy scene. And if you really want to have fun, we'll call it the Supermarine Scimitar. Hi, Daryl. In card, there were Fairy Prince and Monarch engines that never entered production. Yeah, Fairy kept trying engine productions, but they didn't really, you know. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. It's, oh, we tried to produce the engine. We're not really putting the money or the effort into to actually produce it. And so the Scimitar is something pretty cool. And they produce all sorts of weird and wacky things. Oh my god. This was their giant, so, you know, they were producing a giant, looking at giant flying boats. And this was their idea for a bomber. Dama, why are you live streaming if you need to rewrite the last 2 chapters? Because I made a commitment to do this, and because honestly I've been writing non-stop since Friday, and it's nice to take some time off to recharge the mental brain capacity and have a chat with you lot. So that's what I thought I'd do. Admiral Tiberius, hello. So, you know, that's my theory. If I know I have to rewrite I'm not rewriting the last 2 chapters, I'm turning them into 1 chapter. So I am actually rewriting it because I found in past trying to push 2 chapters together by cutting and pasting doesn't work and makes it weird and difficult. So I've got the topics out and I'm going to rewrite it through. But, you know, I've done it most. I've managed to rewrite 2 chapters already to fit in with this new version of the ending this weekend. So I've got 1 more chapter to go. Just cry for me, Argentina. And finally, because the United States Navy is a little bit strange and has its own sort of things, we have the United States Navy aircraft. And I have to say, I do enjoy some of the things in here. I really enjoy... Oh, that's just so cool. Seriously, there are some really cool stuff in here. And stuff you would completely forget about the US Navy. But they do produce some really cool stuff. And when I put this up at a lecture, this. Everyone told me I must be talking about Japanese maritime patrol aircraft, and actually I'm not. I'm talking about a very good American one called the Martin P5M Marlin, which was actually a very good patrol aircraft. And this is what I've used these books for. They have done tremendous work for me over the years in terms of being able to explain to students and give them out. And as you can see from my earlier conversation, about 3 of them, I have a complete set of 10, and currently I only have 5 at home. So I think I must have 5 out on loan, but they'll be back with me shortly. There are students doing various dissertations, and engineering students are usually very reliable for 2 things. 1, getting the books back to me in good order, and 2, needing history books. It's fun. So, that sort of is the book review section. I will say, if anyone ever wants me to review their books or would like books reviewed, get in contact with me over Discord or something like that, and I'm quite happy to review books. I never say no to books coming my way to look at and enjoy reading them. At the moment, I'm having fun because I have 2 books which have been written already about the battle class. Patrick Boniface and Peter Hodges. And you'd think, looking at them, that the answer for which book is going to be better for me to find all the quality information I need for my book, to help me writing a book, as I can't go to the archives as much as I'd like to, it would be quite easy. I'd be going to this one. But actually this one has proved a lot better, because as well written as this one is, it is so stuffed with facts, it actually hides the pertinent facts. So this one is actually better. But no, they're all good, and I have a lot of fun with them. Also, someone was asking me the other week about naval aviation in World War I and anti-submarine ops. And if you want to look at anti-submarine ops in World War I, you basically want to look at this one, the Spider's Web, by PAX, or Theodore Douglas Hallam. It's very good, and it's very interesting to read. Right, as said, let's begin the normal question and answer session. I see there's already some questions coming in, and as the rule is, as long as I have Iron Brew, I will answer them if I can. Sea Dart was not a fighter. Sea Dart, it's as itself is a an air defense missile. The Dart, as in the Blackburn Dart, was a torpedo bomber. That's the answer to Jay Richardson. It's a question of Sea Dart was a fighter. New Orleans. Just checking if I can find a decent picture of it to use if I'm going to discuss New Orleans. That'll do. Alright then. If in doubt, go track down the ONI. So, I have 2.5 litres, so I'm fine. New Orleans class. Now, I always have a bit of a soft spot for these, but I have to say, also, there's part of me which is going, no. So, they are fast-ish, they're efficient-ish, but the New Orleans class are sort of built to try and they have to fulfill 2 roles, and they are making them so they're trying to sort of grow and put new technologies in them and see if they grow, but also trying to use them as battleship replacements, because we can't use battleships, but we need to have the strongest possible battle line, because our reading of Alfred Fair Mahan is that there's going to be a huge battle for sea control in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which is wrong, a wrong reading of Mahan. But leaving out that, so we're going to build the New Orleans class heavy cruisers. Yay. But I actually like them. They actually do a good job, and they're important, you know. But the fact that you had the two youngest ones and one of the first batch, so two of batch 3 and one of batch 3 lost in, I think it's Battle of Sava and the campaign, means they then go through a massive rebuild. And actually, post-rebuild, they're far better. And New Orleans are good. But, you know, they could have been... the trouble is, when you're trying... If you want something to be your battleship stand-in, you then don't want to get too nouveau with it, because you don't want to try and make it do a cruiser drop. So really, in many ways, the New Orleans class are almost battle cruisers in the way that the Americans are sort of approaching, but they're definitely at the cruiser end of the battle cruiser spectrum, which I've discussed before. So they are very much on the cruiser end, and that's a problem. Nighthawk Production, Empire. How Britain Made a Modern World by Neil Ferguson. Whilst not focusing exclusively on matter does play into it. Have you read the book, and how would you rate it? My personal argument would be, if you want to read an Empire book, it's this one. It's written by Brian Laverty, and yes, it does accompany the Dan Snow series, but it's better. It's better. That's what I'm saying. Me and Niall Ferguson. Yeah. Isaiah Watson, what's my thoughts on Jonathan Dibbledy's Battle of the Atlantic? Well, what do you know? I have it right behind me. Look. So this is what we're talking about. Jonathan Dibbledy's Battle of the Atlantic. And he's like many commentators. I do actually like the fact he's written it, because it can bring the Battle of the Atlantic to far more attention. But honestly, if you want more information, want actual detail about actually what went on, you might want to read more. It's one of those books, I sit there and I read it, and I go, right then, let's go to the back. It's mentioning HMS Warsprite in the index, but I can't find a single tribal class destroyer. It's, I can't find a single, ooh. You know, there are lots of groups of ships which aren't really mentioned as much as I'd expect them to be. And it's far more orientated and worrying about the German side. But it does have some good information. So basically, if you're looking for an introduction to the Battle Atlantic, this is what I would call this. It's an introduction to the Battle Atlantic. But it's not a great book on the Battle of the Atlantic. But it's a very good introduction. Furrican, have I missed recommendations on small ships, frigates, corvettes, sloops, Battle Atlantic types? Not yet. That's going to be a few weeks. I've just posted a whole set and actually booked in the next month or so's Bru Ships, so I can list them out for you. We have coming up, in terms of Bru Ships, we have Amphibious Warfare is Bru Ships Episode 8. Bru Ships Episode 7 is Warship Design. Bru Ships episode 6 is Age of Sail. Bru Ships episode 5 is fiction themed books, so that's next week. So basically, we've got a whole series of, you know, books and systems booked in for them, and I'll add small ships into Bru Ships episode 9, if you want. That can go into the first Bru Ships in July. I like Bru Ships. Gives me fun on a Sunday afternoon. Daniel Freeman, worth offering to write a Haze manual for the tribal class? Well, if they asked, I'd do it, but I'm not going to chase after them for it because, honestly, that's a lot of work, and I'd be not sure about Haze. In my experience, if you don't have a book agent, from what I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, can be very, very difficult to get paid. Whereas Pen and Sword, who I've gone with for my first book, are very, very supportive of new writers. But this is the reputations of what I've heard from people I trust. It might not be correct, and so therefore I don't want to cast aspersions. I'm just going with what I've been told. He has 2 litres. Technically I have 2.5 litres. Night Heron Production, go have an iced tea. Hi, Kevin. Jeremiah, JR probably wrote about USN jet flow plane. So many things have been written about USN jet flow plane. Janeworth, Doug Clark, do you include short aircraft amongst your naval aircraft, being as their most famous product was feared by German submarines so much? Yes, I do. Short aircraft are definitely there, and one of the books I have is the short aircraft. But again, it's with a student. This whole series are beautiful. They're produced by the Naval Institute Press, and they are really worth tracking down. Although, they seem to be, depending on the country, if you're UK, they're produced by Putnam. If you're America, it's the Naval Institute Press. So, I have some from Putnam and some from USNI. I have a mixture of the two. See what? I knew they had 3, but I think one was lost. I last heard there was some. They're always trying to replace things. Jeff Beeler, are there any good public domain pictures of Michael Clapp? Ooh. There's one of him standing with Jeremy Larkin in HMS Fearless's hold. Let me just open up 3rd Commando in the Falklands, because Julian takes more photos than Michael does. This is Julian Thompson's book. Julian is far more of a photographer than Michael is. So if anyone's likely to have photos, it's likely to be Julian. There you go. There is Michael Clapp, believe it or not, in there. No, not really a good photo of him in here. I'll have a chat with him and see if he's got some. I'm supposed to have a chat with him. I'm supposed to send him an email tonight, actually, so I will have a chat with him. Daryl Smith, any truth to the rumour you and Drac met at an Iron Brew anonymous meeting? We would never go to such a thing. We're trying to get ourselves off the Iron Brew. God, man. That's terrible, terrible. Then if you're trying to reround without being able to find my Haze manual on her, did Bismarck's radar go in Denmark Streak, and was this at all significant? Yes, the radar did get damaged. The radar did get damaged in Denmark Strait, and it did have an effect on how the rest of the operations went. But it basically meant she didn't really know what was going on. And I think half the reason why she didn't manage to bash the tribals when they were storming around her tonight is because their radar is either not working or not working properly. Either way, they're not getting the information they need to be able to target them properly. Strob, after listening to bilge pumps and your dislike of the F-35, do you think we'll serve the Iron well? I don't dislike the F-35. I think the F-35... How do I put it? I think the F-35 for the Royal Navy makes sense, and for the US Marine Corps makes sense, especially the F-35B. I think it's great for them. It's a STOVL aircraft and they needed one. I think the F-35, as is currently designed for the US Navy and for the US Air Force, it's great for the Royal Navy and the US Marine Corps. Because I say this by saying that those two services are the ones who need the STOVL, and the amount of things which have been put into the aircraft and airframe to try and make it common across all three, to try and deliver this benefit of huge numbers being produced, but to make it suitable for STOVL operations, have meant that it's added a lot of expense and it's added a lot of complication. So, you know. But for the Royal Navy, I think the F-35B is the perfectly sensible aircraft. I think for Britain it's perfectly sensible, because if the Royal Navy is going to get more flight decks, so they're going to be from LHDs to replace Albion and Bulwark, in which case we could end up with a growth in flight decks and enough sort of numbers to guarantee we have flight deck available. That's the only real criteria we need, and we do need that criteria for Britain if you're going to have global reach. As a global reach as a medium power is dependent upon the type of ships you're talking about. And honestly, whilst your system Catabar produces a far better carrier, strategically, having one carrier which is Catabar, or having 5 ships which are 2 strike carriers, 3 LHDs, which can all use your same group of aircraft, so all can be used as carriers or amphibious strike ships depending on the need, is far better for a navy which is smaller. So if you're the US Navy and you could afford to have a fleet of Catabar carriers and a fleet of LHDs, that's brilliant. That's what you need to go. But if you can't afford that, honestly, the F-35B and the way the British are going is better. Domar, I'm not watching you for long, so I don't know if you've already answered, but what is your favourite book about the Dutch Navy? About the Dutch Navy. I did read a really good one, which was all about the Dutch Navy in the Philippines and in the Far East during the interwar years. And I cannot for the life of me find it, or remember its author. But it was a really good one. I will hunt it out. I will hunt it out. Right. New IKB 4472. What happened? I'm loving the Flying Scotsman number there. What happened to the RN Armand trades from World War One? Any books to cover them? There aren't any books I know of to cover them. But I think most of them ended up being converted back to regular trains or sold. Sorry, to the Polish. I seem to remember something possibly going along those lines, but I could be completely wrong. It isn't an area I've really looked into. I would want to look into more of that before I gave a firm answer. Sure, Mac, you can't build a heavy cruiser under treaty limits that does everything. Well, that's the trouble. The New Orleans are trying to do everything, and they don't. So they can't. Yickers. Dr. Clark, do you know of any downing of planes by blowpipe from aboard ship? No. But strange enough, I have heard about aircraft which have been caused trouble by when they've flown low of ships, and ships have suddenly increased in speed, and there's been a consequential increase in black smoke and stuff coming out of them, in that the smoke has come up and has actually caused trouble, and they've ended up spiraling to sea. Happened during an exercise in the interwar years. Pilot did survive. The destroyer very helpfully picked them up. King's Rock, F-35, F-18F, or Gripen for Canada, or one of the dropouts. If I was Canada, honestly, I'd be going for the F-18. in nicest way, is Canada going to be in a position where they're likely to be asked to be involved in the first day one of operations? No. They can offer far more aircraft to both their air defense mission and the rest by going with the F-18s, because they can buy more aircraft, they can support them better. And it's going to sound strange. Once you've suppressed the enemy air defense, if I was the Canadians, I'd be going for E-18Gs as well, or some version of them, because honestly, suppression of enemy air defense is useful. Angus O'Connell, how many swordfish could you pack onto a tribal? Interesting question. Okay, yes, I know it's probably meant as a joke, but there is a story that in World War II, one of the gladiators, which was actually transferred to Malta, might well have been transported across on her in on their flat pack on a tribal. I haven't found any proof of this story, and as far as I know, the tribals were all in the Red Sea. But it's possible. Certainly they had the space. They could have done it. Could have flat packed an aircraft and taken it over if they were going to rush it over. Secondary thoughts on blowpipe to be too heavy to be man portable. It's viable to be man portable, and it could be used. It could, in theory, work. I haven't heard it being used successfully, but it could be used. Right, let's roll down. Ian Carr, could you talk about the process to allow the use of Corsair use from the Iron carriers? Well, it involved a lot of work by this man, Eric Winkle Brown. And basically, the Americans didn't really want the Corsair at the point at which the British decided to use it. So there was this high-performance fighter, which was in production, which they could churn out more of quite quickly. And it could theoretically work from a carrier if you got it sorted. And it was mainly being used by the US Marine Corps at that time, and had been proved very effective by the US Marine Corps in the ground support role. But the US Navy weren't really that keen on it, and all sorts of things because it was considered difficult. The Royal Navy went, right then, we can get this fighter, let's see what we can do with it. They ended up having it. It wasn't a particularly easy process, but it was an interesting point here. The Corsair was most certainly heralded a quantum leap in a shipboard fighter performance when on 20th June 1942 the first production F-4U-1 flew. The only problem was that a further 2.5 years worth elapsed before the US Navy was to consider it suitable for shipboard operations. Whatever the Corsair was, it was certainly not as natural as a carrier-based combat aircraft, and that had, in the final analysis, been the task of which designer Rex B. Bellesi and his team had created the aircraft. In all fairness, however, Chancesport's engineering department had broken an immense amount of new ground in creating this fighter, following a 1st of February 1938 US Navy request for a single-seat shipboard fighter proposal. Basically, the Vought Corsair is this wonderful aircraft which is rather like the New Orleans class cruisers, but slightly more successful. Very, very, very much useful. Vickers, sorry, I did guess that was what you meant by the blowpipe, but I was being a bit facetious in my first answer. I did realise it was probably the missile. But again, very complicated if you consider, compared to the picture I showed you of Swordfish earlier, cockpit. That was the Vought Corsair, and it was difficult, but it worked. It worked. Tony Penfold, I prefer Ed of Offley's Burning Shore. Have you read it? Your thoughts? No, I haven't read it yet. I've got it in my pile of books to read, but I won't give thoughts on it until I've actually managed to get round to reading it. It's sitting in my pile of new books, which is that box down there. Basically, I'm not allowed to open a new books till, like, I'm not allowed to get the new computer, the gaming machine down till I've finished writing the book. This is how I motivate myself to write the book. I've got box of new books, and I've got my gaming computer upstairs in the attic, nicely properly stored, but up in the attic, far away from where I can't get to it easily. Kevin Tart, don't know if this is the place, but your message at the end of the Historian series struck a nerve. I want to learn from history, so we stop all the wars and warlike posturing, especially now. Well, the thing is, we're not going to stop the wars, and we're not going to stop the warlike posturing. But you need to be able to do it properly. You need to be able to do it in a way which is going to get your message across. The reason we're not going to be able to stop it is because we had a period for about 20 years where a strongly worded note did seem to work. But now you've got to the stage where there are enough powers who feel confident in themselves enough that a strongly worded note is not going to stop them if they are doing something which you don't like. So you either have to accept that they have the ability to bully you, in which case you have problems, or you have to be prepared to manage it in a more forthright way. But that requires skill to do it, to get your message across. And that's something which me and Drac and Jamie keep getting back to when we're discussing it in bilge pumps when we're going through this, because you have to do it properly. You have to work out, you know, the classic example is the Royal Navy in the late 1800s and 1920s, when everyone else will be turning up in heavy cruisers and battleships going, look at our power. The #1 navy in the world would send in a sloop or a second-class cruiser and go, okay, everyone, you're going to shut up and start paying attention now. Specifically picking a ship which was so small that it couldn't be considered offensive, but also knowing that it would demonstrate exactly how confident, how powerful the Royal Navy were, because you knew exactly what was over the horizon. So, you know, that's the sort of thing. You've got to start thinking about these things. You've got to start thinking about how you're doing. And that's also trouble with the modern navies, because most of them have been Cold War designed. Most navies do not have that sort of present ship. Most of them don't have that power. Isaac Wilson, I do think that the book focus a lot more on merchant ships themselves, especially the chapter of PQ-17, which feels like Lord of the Flyers. Yeah, PQ-17. PQ-17 is one of those convoy battles which needs to be looked at in the context of other convoy battles. Pound makes some serious issues and some serious mistakes, but hey-ho. You know. Furry Kitten, prior to Small Ships episode, any recommendations upon Johnny Walker or opinions of him? I like him. I do like him. He is a good sloop captain. He comes up through the sloops, and you don't put silly people in charge of your sloops in the distant stations. Wickers, it's Canadian cost taxpayers, hundreds of millions already. Yeah, so they always will though, because what you're doing is you're betting your future. Shomack and Dr. Clark, would you have similar things to say about Toll's Pacific War trilogy? Because I quite like them. Again, I can't read, so audiobooks are my main. They are quite nice to read, and as audiobooks, they're actually quite good. Because they have a nice style. It's going to sound strange, but not all books come across well as audiobooks, okay? You have to have a certain writing style to get a book across as an audiobook. And there are some which are pretty good. The best one I've read recently, and I've listened to the audiobook version because I got it for a friend of mine who's blind. If you're looking for one which comes across as both a good book to read and a good audiobook, if you're interested in that sort of thing, is The Battle of Midway, the Naval Institute Guide to the US Navy's Greatest Victory, edited by Thomas C. Horn. There's actually a really good audiobook I found of this, and it's a really good book to read as well. So, there's that one. Okay? And I will do a big whole proper thing on it, because I'll do a battles one at some point. Right. Ron Shearer, for the RN's armoured trains, look at armoured trains in Illustrated Encyclopedia. Thank you, Ron, and I will have to buy that book myself. Wickers, 2-engine for Canada will be ideal. Yes, that's the other thing about the F-35 versus F-18 for Canada. You've got a lot of mountains, a lot of area. I prefer to have a second engine. I know how reliable they claim the F-35 engine is, and honestly, for the Royal Navy, we've been operating single-engined Harriers for ages, so it doesn't really sort of affect our operations. But for Canada, I prefer to have it. Bailey Inamora. Robert K. Massey's Dreadnought and Castle Seal, then good? Yeah, I quite like them. They're a good introduction to the period. I wouldn't... No books 100%. So you can get... One of the things I find really annoying is when people turn around and go, ah, yes, but this academic book and this book has far more detail. It's got this right and everything. Okay, here's the thing. Some books are 100% right in all their detail, and you have to agree with that. They are amazing. But they're as dry as anything to read, so they're not actually good introductions to a topic. Some books are sort of frame everything in a story-like manner, so they're a very good introduction to the book, but you could go away into the topic, but go away with a slightly incorrect view of the chronology. Massey's are in the latter category. They're very good introductions. In-car, hedgehogs and laser squid became vital air weapons in the Battle Atlantic. Were these invented pre-war as a result of war, or as a result of war emergency? When were details given to USN? Details were given to the USN almost as soon as the Royal Navy was happy with them. They started work on them in the mid-1930s, but it's developing them as it goes, and it's getting it right. Really, it was going to be something which would have come into fruition in the late 1940s, probably, if it hadn't been for World War II, and the need to rapidly grow the capabilities. And it was very rapid growth of capabilities. More pictures of Jeff BLM, more pictures of HMS Leander 1848 than Michael Clapp. I know, I have one of those. Hi, Stuart. Thank you for subscribing, and thank you to everyone who has subscribed. I don't think I'm going to get my target of 4,000 within 2 months, but, you know, I'm very happy with how many I have got, and thank you very much to everyone who has subscribed, because I'm at 3,700 odd, so that's very, very good as far as I'm concerned. So thank you, Sam Stewart. Just thrown up on my screen now. Daniel Freeman, re-photo of Michael Clapp. Could be anyone in Flash Foot. Yes, it could be. That's the trouble. Carl Gown, hello from Belgium. Hello to Belgium. Sean Mack, F-35, fine aircraft, really bad procurement program. I would have to agree with that. Especially good for procurement program if you're the US Marine Corps or the Royal Navy. It suits them lovely. In-car. Are the days of a ship with dock as fearless intrepid done for the RN? Well, we've got the Bay class, we've got HMS Albion and Bulwark. I hope Albion and Bulwark will be replaced properly with LHDs, which will have docks. They won't be America class, they'll be more like Canberra class probably, but I'm hoping that we'll get them. I'm definitely arguing for them and definitely making a loud case for them. Very, very loud. As loud as I possibly can do. Tony Powerful, good aircraft, interesting development program. What LHD would you go for? Well, I think I've just answered that. From the Royal Navy, it'd be the Canberra class. Something variation on it. Probably slightly expanded and modified to suit our needs, but, you know, Canberra class sort of level. Furry Kitten, muted? Not sure why you're muting me. I hope you're not muting me. Don't worry. Okay. Daniel Freeman, Re-F-35 and US Marine Corps use of amphibs. I can see them making a pile of riflemen do an ad hoc ski to allow more horses to get on deck, like a QE class. Actually, that's the thing that surprised me most in the US Marine Corps. I think for the LHDs, in that if you've got the America class, especially the ones which have been completed without docks, i.e. America and the number 2, which I'm forgetting the name of, is so they are very much aviation centric. I am very surprised, although not surprised because they're talking about mass volume of their flight deck for the helicopter ops as well, that they haven't added on a ski ramp, because honestly it makes a huge difference in the taking off and landing of aircraft. Strub, you have mentioned the RN use of labour-saving devices to keep their crews low in the Americans. What are a few examples? Well, for example, top of my head, I'd go for the Queen Elizabeth class's humongous brand new system, which is designed to move ordnance around the ship. It's pretty much all automated to such a huge extent. But also they have other watch-keeping systems and all sorts of things built into the ships to try and reduce and make it the more labour saving and make things more orientated. And you have often got more redundancy built into systems to try and make it more labour saving. So it increases costs of the individual unit, but actually can decrease cost of operations, especially in manpower, which is expensive for Britain. Very good. Nope, you're not. My speaker's just cut out. Okay. Jeff Beeler, ask Michael Clapp what decoration is he wearing next to QE2 Jubilee 77 decoration. I will ask him that. Dana Freeman, I think F-35 is a good aircraft, but not wonderful for everything. Good for the UK, but I worry about the idea of an all F-35 force. Yep. Brock Payne, I found a reference to Commander A. Scott Littlejohn's Royal Naval Air Service Armoured Trains report on the operation setup. September 1914, March 1915. Ooh, that sounds cool. Tony Pinfield, Buccaneer is still the best naval aviation aircraft? Yeah. Paul from Chicago, did the RN do a study to finding need to have more force in 2020, 2030, and that's why they removed carrier aviation in the early part of the century? No. Honestly, no. There was an SDSR and someone decided to save money. That was it. It wasn't any study. It wasn't any advanced thinking or, oh, we can do this. It was, I want to save money. What programs do I cut to save this money? And it's a nice white elephant to cut in some people's minds. Because people like the phrase white elephants when it comes to defence. Because they've always got this theory that this next latest idea is going to make all the other things irrelevant. And it rarely does. Honestly, as long as you need to project power from the sea around the world, you're going to need some form of aircraft carrier. As long as aviation is it. Stephen White, improvement for the Corsairs was the steel decks of US carriers helped since they ploughed up the US decks. Also, the 8-inch wing clip, tip clip improved landing. Yeah, it did. The RN really did like the Corsairs when they got to use them, but they were pretty much as difficult to handle in terms of landing as the Seafire was. Hence the curved landing approach, and often they would do a curve or they do a zigzag, and which is another reason why they could actually use the Seafire quite so well, because often some of the techniques transferred across between the two because they have similar problems of a humongous nose. Basically, the Corsair and the Seafire and Spitfire and all are aircraft versions of, how do I put this politely, because I know the audience watching. So to my cousins who are watching, the little ones, cover your ears now. Uncle Alex is about to say something which could worry your mums. Okay, so I'll wave when you can uncover your ears. Basically, we all know that certain men, and sometimes women possibly, buy cars which have very long bonnets because it's a good substitute or a midlife crisis. Well, these are midlife crisis aircraft. They have huge, long noses. And rather like those cars, when you're trying to park them and if you're pulling them in front into a space, you can't see anything over the front. You also can't see anything over the front of these. And that's it. Right. Cousins, you can open it, you can watch again. I still tried to keep that as polite as I could because I know you girls might as well have not taken your hand and put your hands over your ears. All right. Jerison, also, what circumstances would the FAA choose what fighter to use when? When would be more advantageous to use Seafire, Firefly, Corsair, and Cats? Basically, the RN went with whatever air fighter was available. They weren't the types who would go, we would like this for this. But also, and as I'll get into this tomorrow, if you have an air carrier which has been refitted in the United States and has had American equipment put in it, it's easier to use the American aircraft on usually, because they're already designed for it. But when you're using a carrier which hasn't been refitted in the States and got British equipment on it, again, it's easy to use the British aircraft. But honestly, the British were quite adept at anglicising aircraft and anglicising American equipment. So, it really didn't matter that much. Jefferson, really odd question on Royal Navy FA in World War II. It seems that there were 2,500 Seafires, 1,000 Sea Hurricanes, 1,700 Firefly, 600 Fulmars, and God knows how many Wildcats Corsairs. Point being, there must have been points when they had more planes than deck space, and even taking into account training squadrons, what the hell did the FA do with spare planes? That's a lot of aircraft, but also they had a lot of escort carriers and they had a lot of other things going on. I'm still not quite sure what they had 2,500 Seafires. I don't think they probably did at the time. Overall, you know, A, you're losing aircraft through maintenance, but B, also you're getting new aircraft, you're getting them out and everything. You know, you very rarely have that many aircraft at any time. I think that's probably through the war those figures are. They would look closer to the through the war figures. So, you know, you had a lot plus you have a lot of maintenance and you're losing and damaging aircraft, all these things. It carries on, but yeah. Jerison, read somewhere that the Cats were used on escort carriers because they were good for short decks and free up the other aircraft for the front line. Wildcats were especially used on escort carriers. They did like them. In fact, that's where Eric Winkle Brown first flies a Wildcat, or as it's called, a Martlet. But they are other aircraft. Seafires are used from escort carriers and all sorts of things. It's basically it's whatever's available. Yeah. Daryl Smith, when it comes to stopping wars and diffusing tensions, I'd like to apologise for the USA right now. The trouble is you have a inexperienced China trying to stretch its wings, and you have an America which it's not just this president. I know everyone would love to blame just this president, but honestly, you've had a run of presidents since Bill Clinton who really do not know how to deal with global tensions and how to run these things. And it's nothing wrong with them. They just focus so much on the domestic politics. They haven't got the idea, and this is because most of the stuff was done early in the Cold War. By the end of the Cold War, it was all focused on nukes and all these things. It's just, you know, it's complicated. But, you know, a lot of modern politicians do not like nuance or complicated answers because that causes them trouble. Carl Gannon, what are your thoughts about the Hawker Sea Fury? I like the Sea Fury, and thankfully for that question, one of the books I have sitting here is this one, which has the Sea Fury in it. What I find interesting about the Sea Fury is it actually, they compare it, and they actually give you the idea, they compare it to the land-based Fury, which was the first aircraft, and then it was turned into a Sea Fury. And they explain how the Sea Fury, let's go for this one actually, it's got bigger pictures in it. evolves. Thought it was in here. Or is it in his other one? Could well be in his other one. But he's got, it's, you know, the Sea Fury is one of these cool aircraft. It evolves. And when it's first built, it's probably terrible. But they keep on with it because it has such good potential. And when it does come into service, it's an excellent aircraft. And I wrote about it in an article called Peaking Obsolescence on Global Maritime History now, but it was originally published on a British Naval History, which was the first iteration of that website. And what always interested me about the Sea Fury was it is the only piston aircraft which shoots down jets. And it shoots them down fairly conclusively and is pretty good at chucking them off it as well. So you don't have a sort of a nice thing where you have jets coming and going, they're going to wipe the floor. They don't. The Sea Fury is kind of going, yeah, I'll push back. And you've got that sort of transition. Seemed like we had a military book club in the 70s and book bindings were cheaper but content the same. Have those books still? Would two automatically and could return or request certain types of books. Oh, cool. Tony Penfold, have you read the new 809 Squadron from the Squadron book from Falklands War? Hope it's as good as the Sea Harrier of the Falklands. I haven't read it. It's in the box to be read, but it does look good. Angus O'Neill, has your aunt taken you? How has your aunt taken your growing subscriber base? In good humour. In good humour. My family often have bets and these sort of things going back and forwards, and it's always for familial bragging rights, and it's quite good. In fact, she's now making sure most of the younger cousins tune in on a Sunday afternoon because apparently this is the most educational of the ones I do. So she's going around the family as a great aunt, as most of it is, and pushing them and making sure they get on the thing to watch it. Shawmac, was King right to push for a quick offensive in the Pacific? Look, if you take your time in the Pacific, that gives the Japanese time to build up. It also gives you time to build up, but giving the Japanese time to get organised instead of forcing them to start reacting is always going to be an issue. If you give them time, you're still probably going to be reacting to them. So the only way to make them react to you and the only way to get back control of the war is to go on a quick offensive. It's not necessarily the most sensible option, but it's not really a bad one either. It's the least bad option available. It's the only option which is really pragmatic. And it's what you have to do if you're king and you want to establish the USA as a major power post-Second World War. You have to start winning a theatre. You have to take control and win a theatre. And you can't do that in Europe. You can't do that in the Mediterranean. The Royal Navy, the British are just too powerful, too present. Because they are so over-focused on area, though, that means they're weak in the Pacific. So you can do it in the Pacific. You can go and take control, complete dominance in the Pacific. Kevin Tank, what happens to drop tanks when they are jettisoned from aircraft? Did the tanks float and reused, or were they sent to the bottom of the ocean? Okay. So, here's a cute fact. Theoretically, sometimes they get carried back. Okay, sometimes they got carried back. Sometimes they're jettisoned, and they don't. They get dropped into places, and you find them turning up in villages. Sometimes they do float around the ocean, and you find them washed up on strange, random islands. In fact, I was half surprised that Tom Hanks' movie didn't make use of World War II drop tanks that he turned into some sort of kayak. We all know the movie I'm talking about, the one where he starts talking to, I think, a basketball. Anyway, leaving that to one side. Drop tanks do tend to sink and do tend to disappear. So, you know, that's quite good. There's a good period photo of Michael Clapp talking to 40 commando troops during the Falklands War in his book. Yes, there is. That's him with Jeremy Larkin, I think, standing next to him. King Rose Valley, bottom of the ocean, Kevin, they're disposables, usually. That's usually where they are now. Sea mites, drop tanks, some are huge. Also, we used to get engine containers and weld the seams to use them as water tanks in the fields. Now shipping containers are used for many things. Surplus are quite good. I agree. Cosmo Flanker. USN has an old version of ski jumps. They do have an odd version of ski jumps. I think they see them as a threat to a Cadabar carrier. I think they see them that if they put them on, then there's going to be someone going, well, you've produced a ski jump carrier. Look how much cheaper it is than a Ford class. Ergo, why are we building the massive carriers? So I can understand that aversion with the Congress they're dealing with. But... and possibly their theory is that if they need them in a major war, they can quickly add them on. So I wouldn't be surprised if, rather like Admiral Henderson in the 1930s, there has been plans done, but it won't be done until it's needed. Bandhome, controversial question. Should the UK focus on the RN and RMC over the Army if there comes future defence cuts, or should all services suffer equally? Okay. So, all services have a role in the defence of the United Kingdom and its interests. I would say the Navy and the Royal Marines are critical for global reach and global presence, but I would say with the Army, I do sometimes wonder whether we could actually get better value for money in this country by increasing the size of the reserves and shifting certain areas into the reserves, i.e. the armoured divisions, etc. Could they be made by a small cadre of regulars and a far larger cadre of reservists, or these sort of things? But that isn't really my area of expertise, so I wouldn't really like to run into it. But it's interesting. I think we do need a stronger Navy than we have. Not much stronger, but slightly stronger Navy than we have. And I think that the Army needs the range of capabilities. It needs to maintain the range of capabilities it has. It needs them properly maintained. It doesn't have really enough artillery, enough command and control, all sorts of things. Fire control radars for mortars and all sorts of things. It doesn't really have enough of, and it needs them. So there are gaps in the way the Army is put together, which makes me loath to consider cutting it, because I'm already worried about its level, and we do need an army of that size. But, as I said, there is part of me which sits there and goes, right then, so our theatre entry forces are the Royal Marines and the Paras. Okay. Then after that, who's going in after that? Well, probably it's going to be the strike brigades. All right, so we're going to get the strike brigades there. Okay, who's going in after that? Well, probably after a strike brigade, it'll be one of the multi-role brigades. Okay, because that's the easiest to transport next. Okay, so multi-role brigade. Who's going in after that? An armour brigade. So you've got quite a long while before you bring in the armour brigade to join a division that you have you sent in there. Okay, could the armour division be made of reservists? I don't know. It's a question. Darrell Smith, one of the shipyards making the US littoral combat ships is near me. Are they semi-useless, kind of useless, or totally useless? Okay, right. So, LCS are not... We've had this discussion a few times in Bru Ships. Not in Bru Ships, in bilge pumps. This is Bru Ships. I'm losing track of all the names. Okay, so... they are actually not as useless as they necessarily come across, but they have been put together and marketed in a fairly silly way. because they were pointed out they were supposed to be the Swiss Army knife, rather like the F-35, which would solve all ills. They're never going to. Okay? You're never going to be able to build a ship like that. They are pretty much not a frigate. I would call, if I was going to classify them in anything, I'd be saying corvette. I would call them literal corvettes, LCs myself. But the concept they were built around was the idea that the American sea dominance was going to be continuing constantly. And the trouble is, you haven't built up the next layers of it, because you can afford to have sloops, you can afford to have corvettes as your front line if they have the graduated firepower behind it. But the trouble is, the American Navy has the LCS, the Arleigh Burkes, and the aircraft carriers. And the Arleigh Burke is too much of a fighting ship to be the next up in the presence level. Which sounds really weird, but it hasn't got the space for the presence. It hasn't got the space for the diplomatic side of the presence mission. The Arleigh Burkes are lovely fighting ships. Do not get me wrong. They are wonderful fighting ships. But their space, their way they're designed, they don't really have the impact and area they need for the diplomatic side of things. So, whereas if I was designing a force, I would have had a Spruance or Zumwalt class sort of size-ish cruiser that I would get. It would be LCS would be going in. Then if I needed graduated, a cruiser would turn up. Then an Arleigh Burke would turn up to back up the cruiser, and so you'd have the sort of fighting ship on the cruiser, and then you'd have the carrier group turn up. So you need the graduated. They don't really have that graduation. Okay. Samuel, they're not integrating a Storm Shadow onto the F-35 was a complete... Yeah, they're shot through the foot. Yes, it is. Shurmak, when you need to compensate... Yeah, pretty much. From a Furry Kit. Seafire, a Mercedes compensator. Could be. Daryl Smith, is the R2800 double wasp engine the sexiest engine ever to land on a carrier? It's pretty hot. Strub, Doctor, would you ever guide a tour of naval sites for your subs? Possibly. Possibly I would. It would have to be... It's, at the moment, I'm not really thinking of that, because honestly, I'm not really thinking much of getting out the house at the moment, because, as I said before, I'm in my house. I am in the family home, luckily enough for this crisis. My mum has got severe asthma and has had cancer in the past, so... She's on the completely government letter at watch list, not going anywhere. And my sister, well, has got severe asthma and pretty much had a conversation with a doctor, and it was a case of no. So she hasn't had the letter, but yeah, not going anywhere either. So the only one allowed in and out the house is me, and even I'm being very, very careful because I don't want to bring anything back to them because that would mean curtains. So I basically go out to walk the dog and that's it. But yeah, maybe eventually. It'd be certainly fun to take you all around HMS Warrior or HMS Belfast. Although maybe on the Belfast there might be something me and Drac might do. But that's for Drac to really work on. Daniel Freeman, at Daniel Smith, I would say the Rolls-Royce Merlin is the sexiest aircraft, but the aircraft attached isn't necessarily the best. No, and sorry, Griffin is far better for carrier operations than a Merlin. Merlin has the cachet, but no, Griffin, definitely way better. Jailingworth, someone needs to explain to the politicians that wars still happen in spite of having nuclear weapons, ergo hardware is needed. Unfortunately, that is the case. You do need to explain it. Jeff Beeler, FAA Wildcat slew with the Desert Air Force, for example. They did. The Fleet Air Arm gets everywhere in World War II. They really do. Schumacher, well, there is something wrong with Clinton and Bush, but that's beside the point. You see, the trouble is, you cannot look at current politics without looking at where it comes from, and where the politicians come from, and what you've been dealing in the past. And I would say, in the nicest way, Western politics has been becoming increasingly domestic-orientated for about the last 50, 60 years, and this has meant there's been less and less exposure to foreign policy. Less and less exposure. Back in a second, just getting called. Hello. Right. Actually, no, speaking earlier about the Iron Brew, I think my girlfriend is starting to get worried that she's going to call up someday and find out that I have decided to just cut out the whole drinking of it process and just decided to inject it directly into my veins. But, you know, we'll leave that to one side. All right, getting back to the questions. Daryl, so China is the USA. What USA used to be Great Britain? No, it isn't. Sorry, no. China sees itself as becoming the new world power. I'm not sure if China can actually do it. There are certain issues for China which cause it a lot of problems. And also, I'm not sure China... I think China likes the idea of being world power more than they like the reality of it. I don't think they want to do what the reality is. So that's what I think their problem is. Jebila, fun fact, the Fulmar has the most kills of any FAA fighter. Good tactics in a target-rich environment. Yes, and this is another point I make about when I'm talking about the Indian Ocean and Somerville's campaign out there. Because most people go look at the number of Japanese aircraft that they theoretically mount on their carriers and go, wow, they could have completely annihilated the Royal Navy. Well, if the Royal Navy had taken out 2 or 3 carriers in the first night, A, you have the fact that not all aircraft would have been available for operation on the Japanese carriers, if any of them remain, on the ones that remained, and B, if they had found the Royal Navy, and they didn't find the Royal Navy as it was during the next day, the Royal Navy has very well-trained fighter direction and fighter control of its aircraft. And this is something which the Royal Navy has really, really honed thanks to the Mediterranean. So they're used to facing that sheer number of aircraft, and they could do a fairly good job. So, you know, that's my point. Fairy Kitten, wasn't the Sea Fury the only prop plane to kill a second-gen jet? Yes, it was. Angus, Sonal, was the Sea Fury more manoeuvrable than the jets? It was many things more than the jets. It was also tougher. And I think possibly one of the kills was actually achieved by bashing it. Yeah. Jacob, yes, the P-51 did shoot down some 262s, but second-generation jets were at the point at which they should have been able to, were theoretically supposed to completely outclass piston aircraft, and yeah, it didn't work. Okay. Darryl Smith, had Admiral King stayed in charge of the Atlantic Fleet, whose side would he have been on? Probably the British side again. He didn't, just because he didn't like the British didn't mean he had any love for the Germans. You know, there is a difference. You can dislike both people equally. Ah, well, yes. If you want to talk about nuts, the stand-in furry research assistant, there he is. Hello. You going to be helpful? That's good. Yeah, completely normal behaviour. Look, you know, you have to have a furry research assistant. Mine's currently downstairs, enjoying being patted by his mummy. Tis Francis Ford. What was the risk of sea spray to early naval jets? Those early jets seem much more difficult. They are, and it's quite difficult. They are very, very corrosive. So it's one of the big costs of making a sea jet, an aircraft work at sea. And it's another reason why I consider the F-35 a particularly fun project. Especially from the US Air Force's perspective. Because, again, all the marinization that has gone into the jet design that they don't need. Because they are not routinely operating in a saltwater environment with all the impact of a saltwater on your aircraft. It's the joy of the F-35. Seriously, some people have made a lot of money of it. But considering nothing, if you could build a sort of new next generation aircraft but use 2 engines from the F-35, it could work really quite well. Jeff Miller, King's strategy in the Pacific works until Santa Cruz and the loss of Hornet and heavy damage to Enterprise. Needed Fletcher to really make it work. He grasped the big picture best. I'd say it's more Nimitz' strategy than King's. And honestly, they have a lot of issues out there. Richard Hughes, if the Royal Navy built a model cruiser, what do you think it should be armed with? Well, you know, we are building something called the Type 26 Global Combat Ship, which is now a frigate, so that sounds to me like a cruiser. I would just, if I was building a modern cruiser, it'd be slightly bigger. Probably than the Type 45s even. It would be armed with a sort of Type 45 air defense suite, but also I'd like it armed with at least 2 big deck guns. I probably wouldn't want it nuclear powered, so I probably wouldn't go for a railgun at the moment. But I'd want enough power to have different laser armaments. And a whole suite of Tomahawks. Whichever takes over from them. Whatever they decide to take over from them eventually. Kilo 19. Heard stories of cruise ship chiefs filling new drop tanks with various alcohol. Pilot takes it up to altitude and comes down with slushies. I've heard those stories as well. I'm always a bit surprised about how they get it out. You know, that's the question. That's the question. How do they get it out? Angus O'Connell. Well, the US does owe the UK the lending of a carrier. I'm presuming you're talking about USS Robin, aka HMS Victorious. Want to borrow the Ford? No, really don't. No. Jeff Beeler, modern cruiser has many area defense AIM missiles plus surface attack and land attack plus command and consensus facilities. What the Zumwatch should be? Sort of. Kevin Tank, are all nuclear powered submarines and aircraft carriers going to be turned into museum ships as they're nuclear powered? No. Although you could, if you could theoretically get one working properly, you could, of course, use them as both a museum ship and a nuclear power station. Just most cities probably wouldn't want it anywhere close to them. Oh, this is a good one. Tony Penfold, Vian replaces Woodward in the Falklands. Different strategy used, your thoughts, number of bow section lot. In the nicest way, if Vian had replaced Woodward in the Falklands, God help the Argentinians. I think in the nicest way, the task... Woodward was very worried about preserving the task force, probably because he was thinking very much about fighting the wider Cold War and the criteria which came with that. I have a feeling if Vian had been down there in charge, he would also been thinking about these things, but he would have probably been trying to push the task force closer to the islands, if not trying to get between the islands and Argentina to block off the air attack, because, again, that's what the Royal Navy of his generation certainly had done. If you look at what, I think it was Formidable got up to, and other carriers got up to in World War II, they very much, the Royal Navy tried to position themselves between an up threat, the army and the danger. So they probably would have done that. I have a feeling he would have aggressively gone and tried to find the Argentinian Navy. I'm not sure if a carrier would have made it home. Danny Freeman, Tony Penfold, I see a ship taking over the charge when H. Jones was charging up the hill. Possibly, you know, honestly, you could have used a Leander class for that role. Sean Mack, Dr. Clark, some of your knowledge would be a great tour guide. I do enjoy doing tours. I take students on the trips quite often. I love taking students around Portsmouth docks, and I've done that a few times with Kings, and I did that a few times with Kingston. And I said, you know, it's the fun things you do. Right then, let's get this nice and... Hang on. The thing is, when I see the Alexander Clarks, they're really useful for me, because they form, when I'm scrolling down, they form me as points I can do so I don't scroll past. Stephanie Wilson, sadly politicians only hear what they want to hear, and politicians who think any further forward than next week are a rare beast. There are a few politicians who do think further forward than next week. I think the trouble is, it's getting funding for it, because there's always, especially... I've noticed this really recently with the current crisis, with the 24-hour news and these sort of things. There are a lot of issues which tend to be, we've got this current crisis, all the money should go to this now. And then next minute they're going, and there's this crisis, all the money should be going to this now. And you sit there and go, you can't keep shifting all the money around. This is half the problem. You need to have constant long-term funding. You can't keep having a crisis. And money doesn't grow on trees. I'm sorry, I wish it did. It doesn't. If it did, I would have a wonderful Navy, a wonderful NHS, and a wonderful all these things, an education system, and all completely lovely. But it doesn't. So you need to make a balance. And it's difficult. And it requires actual thinking long term. Yes, I do vault the bed quite often. It's good exercise. I know, people get surprised. What is Iron Brew? Iron Brew is the nectar of the gods. It allows direct communication between a human naval historian and the ships which are created for them to study. Jacob Werner, yes, we do have Dr. Pepper in the UK, but it's not, and it's nowhere near as good as Iron Brew. It's Francis' fault. I always used to say, there always used to be the quote that the right wing wanted to spend lots of money on the armed forces, but didn't want to do anything with them, and the left wing wanted to not spend so much money on the armed forces, but wanted to do lots with them. It's trying to get a balance of the two. Daniel Freeman, IV9 brew not recommended, but you could try a nasogastric tube and continuous feed that way. That sounds like an idea to work on. Sure, it's quite a bit of work dominating the world. This is the trouble, and this is what I think China is going to find if they want to do it. Do they really want to do it? I've got enough problems there and domestically without taking on the world's problems. Someone here had 2 war tours, could even take paddleboat trip up a Hoang Mississippi River. Was in a round table that put on lectures at Yosemite Lodge. It's about $2,000 a night with meals. Oh, good lord. Bad home. China has too much debt, too little institutional knowledge, and not enough experience, and partly command structure is more of a weakness than a strength. I could agree with some of those things. I would say institutional knowledge. You always have to remember China's been an empire for a long, long time. They have been. China is an empire. It's kind of like Russia is an empire. A lot of people dominated by a group of people in the middle. Kevin Tank, FAA confuses me. I always wonder what the Federal Aviation Administration is doing with planes. They don't own any airplanes to my knowledge. They don't, but the Fleet Air Arm does. How were the escort carriers used in the Battle Atlantic? Very well. When I started end of service, okay, they provide 2 roles. One, you carry some fighters to an extent provide some coverage in the latter stages of the approach when you could be in bomber's range, but mostly to drive off condors so they don't call in the U-boats. Mostly you carry swordfish, though, for anti-submarine patrols. And these are really nasty. Swordfish are really hated by U-boats because they fly quietly, they fly slowly, and they can fly low for hours, and they just keep on hunting and hunting. And then the poor U-boat is just, just happily poking its little periscope up above the water to try and spot the merchant ships it wants to kill. That's its job. And there's a ping on the nasty circling swordfish. And that goes, ooh, U-boat, drop depth charges time. And before you know it, the poor U-boat has depth charges being dropped on it, and there are destroyers coming in on it, and it's just not nice. It's just not fair. Yes, the ASV radar is a very, very useful asset that the Royal Navy exploits shamelessly throughout World War II, and other navies really take their time catching up with it. Basically, the Swordfish is the aircraft version of the Tribal class destroyer. Whilst the Germans might have success against them, more often than not, if there's going to be a weird and wacky way to die, it'll be the Swordfish inflicting it. Jangworth, being a world power is very, very expensive. Will China be willing to foot the bill? This is another problem. New IKB 4472. Can you elaborate on what you mean by China liking the idea of a sort of top global power, but not liking the reality of being a top global power? Well, if you're number one, you have to be number one, but that also means you have the responsibility of being number one. That means when there's a problem in the world, you're looked at to fix it. Because number one fixes the problems. If you don't come along and fix the problems, you're not number one. If you are prepared to fix the problems, then you're number one. But if you're not prepared to fix the problems, you're not number one. So if you're not prepared to foot the bill, if you're not prepared to, when other countries are fighting each other, go in and slap them around and tell them to stop, or when there are problems going in the world, go and start organising it, you get into trouble. And that's the thing. When you're doing this happens, you have to look at it. Kevin Tag, thank you. How are the book fees coming along? Here's some extra help. Thank you very much. So you need to solve these things. You need, that's the trouble with number one. It's not just, yeah, we're number one in the world. We're the most powerful nation. If you don't actually do the stuff you need to, you're not number one. So the thing is, if China wants to be number one, that's good. They'll have to surpass the Americans. They'll have to start spending more. They have to start doing it. But that means they'll have to start doing the things. They'll have to start being there. It's a cost, as the British found. And that's the reason why the British ended up passing the flag to the Americans, because the British no longer want to pay the bill. Post-Second World War, they just don't. The Americans are prepared to do it. They'll let the Americans do it. It's a nice idea being number one, but there's real cost being number one. In fact, being number two is far easier, because you can just, anytime you have a problem, there's a problem in the world, you can just look to number one and go, but you're number one. You have to deal with this. So being number two is a perfect position. And I think China will actually find in long term that's what they prefer to be. Shulmac, for as much as people focus on how selective the Japanese were with their pilots, a lot of it that had nothing to do with what made a good aviator. No, a lot of it had a lot less than to do with what made a good aviator, and far more to do with politics and other fun things. Thank you again to everyone who does the super chats and all those other things, and subscribers and patrons and those people who are on the Discord server, which I will remember to post a link to while I'm sort of talking about it now. It's very kind of you. And it's very helpful of you, because it helps me. It's, as I said, this is what I'm doing all this, and any money that comes in is going towards paying for my research over next summer, because I'm not doing my normal summer work, and my normal summer work is going off and doing A-level and GCSE instruction. That's school kids, and I run their revision centres over the summer, and that earns me fairly good money, believe it or not. For a company called Justin Craig, who've been doing it for a long time, and they take over boarding schools, and I'm basically headmaster for a week. You can imagine me doing that as headmaster for a week. It's quite a fun time. So I get to play a lot of rugby, do a lot of basketball, kayaking, rock climbing, all sorts of those things, to sort of, because we arrange activities for the kids to have fun times in the evening. Even once or twice I've dressed up as Professor Dumbledore, because it's in one particular school, Denton College, we do a Hogwarts themed dinner, and I am Professor Dumbledore for the night because I'm the headmaster. So all those sort of things get to happen. It's a fun time, but I don't get to do that this summer because everything's being shut down because of COVID-19. So basically, there was going to be no research this summer until I started doing this, and then people started being very generous and kind. Alex, Dr. Clark, why haven't you made a permanent Discord link? Honestly, because I don't know how. I know how to make the 48-hour long ones, or 24-hour long ones. I don't know how to make the permanent ones. I will have a look. If someone who's on the Discord knows better and can tell me how, I will do it. Right then, so. Carl Hammond, opinion on how Bomber Harris fared as a commander at the air station of the estuary by Pembroke Dock. He did okay. He could have done a lot better, but he did okay. It's tough being an administrator sometimes. Jeff Wheeler, favourite RN carrier captain that did not become an admiral? So many of them do go on to become admirals. That's the problem. Once you start putting, in the nicest way, there aren't many who are command carriers, unless you're talking going down to the escort level, who don't actually become some sort of admiral at some point. There really aren't many, and most of the ones who don't become admiral, they don't become admiral for a reason, because they're just not that great. I think there's a guy called Sandman who doesn't become an admiral because his wife dies not long after World War II, and he wants to look after the kids. Basically, he has 6 kids at home, and he basically goes, I'm a senior captain, I want to go look after my, I think, 4 daughters and 2 sons. But I'm not 100% sure. He might not. Sean Mac, Dr. Scott, I DM'd you a permanent link of the Discord. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I will work that one out. So I'll work that all out. Paul Johnson, sorry, missed out on some of the chat. Rhubarb Crumble's calling. Don't rub it in. Crumble is lovely. Jalen Worth, Admiral King was on Admiral King's side. He was on the US's side. Admiral King was a fierce patriot. He put the USA before everything else. So, you know, that's what he was in care of. K19, wonder how much expense the greed of military contractors and politicians add to the cost of the F-35 program. Probably not as much as we might think, but probably more than we'd be comfortable with. Sure, Mac. Thank you. I will use that. And Sean, because you're being so kind and helpful, I'm now going to make your life probably less fun by making you a flotilla leader. So, enjoy. My cruelty knows no bounds. Yep. Sorry, Sean, you're now a flotilla leader. And for those people who don't know, flotilla leaders are basically, you know, Drac has admirals on his system. I have flotilla leaders on my Discord, and there are going to be flotillas at a certain point to help people organize things and to try and just stop, basically make sure everything runs well. Oh God. There we go. Right then. Thank you, Jeff. All right. Now let's see where I've got to. Ah, yes. There. What are the pros and cons of UXV combatant? If you mean the unmanned one, the pros are you get a new version of the Flower class corvette, basically, or you know, a trawler, in that it can be designed as a ship which is enough of a threat to a submarine that, frankly, they should probably take it out. But if they take it out, they reveal their position and they don't actually get anything that's worthwhile. So, you know, it's a torpedo waster. And it could also be used as something to reinforce areas when you need to, and as a presence tool. But if you're talking about next generation large combatant, well, that's going to be a next generation cruiser, hopefully, and hopefully it works. Richard Hughes, you could build a nuclear ship museum near Sellafield. You could. That would be an interesting place. Sean Mac, the whole thing in the Pacific is that King did try to micromanage Nimitz and found it didn't work and let Nimitz mostly run the Pacific. The only thing that King pushed for was Guadalcanal Operation Shootering. Yes, he did, but micromanaging Nimitz was never going to work because Nimitz was kind of like Henderson in that he could ignore seniors when he wanted to. When Canada had an aircraft that it carried, there was talk to replace the F-2 Banshee by A-4 Skyhawk. Would that have been good if the carrier could be kept? Yes, it probably made sense. Although I'd have preferred to go for the Phantom if they could have done. For the US, because then they could have fitted in more of the US Navy and that would have made more sense. Incar, Iron apparently have not scrapped any of their nuclear substate. Nope, they are all sitting in Portsmouth. I think, or Plymouth. I think they're sitting in Portsmouth and Plymouth. They are all pretty much boxed together. Yeah, it's fun. Keep an eye on them. We all do. I've done the Bomber Harrison Command on the Naval Air Station in Pembroke Dock. King's Rock. I missed a Bonnie, and I was yeah, we all missed a Bonnie. Tony Penfold. Book recommendations for RN operations in the Pacific. I have two behind me, I think. Yeah, Kamikaze by Stuart Eden and the Royal Navy in Eastern Waters by Boyd. They're the two good two ones. That one's my personal favourite. I did this last time on the Japanese, but the British Pacific, sorry, by Stuart Eaton is excellent. It is really, really good. Palgear, finished Bilge Pumps 2 yesterday. Very one-sided in my opinion, although I can understand it, but I hope that current bully boat diplomacy will not lead to conflict. Worst outcomes can be ridiculous. I'm sorry if it came across one-sided. I thought we were having a usual ding-dong, but okay. Yickers, Dr. Clark, most loved carrier aircraft anytime, any nation. Well, the Swordfish has to be up there, doesn't it? You know, it's just, you know, the Swordfish is just so well known and synonymous with carrier aircraft. Hellcat is probably my favourite, and I'll go with a Hellcat. Hellcat or Tomcat, they're the two big famous ones. The Cat series are loved. Steve White, we borrowed Victorious to give Enterprise repair time. No critical fighting, but work Saratoga proved our allies could work together. Yes, but if there had been serious fighting, having Victorious along would have been quite useful. This is another point I'd often make about the whole 1942. If Somerville had managed to score a battle, even sink just a few of the Japanese carriers and push them back, you could well have had Somerville's Eastern Fleet meeting up the US Navy force, and you would have had 3 Royal Navy carriers and Saratoga operating together as a major force to try and push the Japanese back. It would have been quite an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing to think of. Lionheart X-ray. Is it a requirement to be in a British naval historian and like Iron Brew? If you don't like Iron Brew, we do look down on it. No, seriously, no. It's not a requirement. It's just something we do enjoy. Quite a few of us. King's Rook. Are RCN Bru Ships in the future? Yeah. I'm getting cold again. Might well be about my tea. Which, don't worry, will be done in here because it's going to be sandwiches. So I won't be going anywhere. Yeah. Yep, looks like I'm getting tuna sandwiches for tea. Uh-huh. There's lots of good discussions going on root beer. Swordfish with rockets were even better. Shaker Werner, the swordfish is the old lady with a high mugability count. I've seen a lot of memes going around recently where you see that guy holding a knife and the old guy produces a gun. That is a swordfish when you're a submarine. Yes, but you know, if you imagine imagine this group of sort of old ladies walking along in a convoy. That's your merchant ships. Mugger comes up with a knife. Hello, the old boy who's with them turns out to be carrying a gun, or one of the old ladies who's with them turns out to be carrying a gun. You know, that's the fun times. Steve Wells, like to see more on the USN's famous paddle wheel carriers, Great Lakes. Seen pictures on navalized T6 Texans with tail hooks. Must have been covered paddle wheels. The paddle wheel carriers were really cool. They were a good method of trying to train up carrier pilots really quickly, so that they could operate on carriers. So instead of you having to take out one of your line carriers out of service, out of the front line to train up your pilots, you actually have a paddle steam liner converted to a carrier. It works really quite well. Sure. Doctor, HFDF or Huff Duff radar or sonar? What was the most important tech for the Atlantic? Okay, Huff Duff is always going to be critical, and sonar ASDIC matters in terms of prosecuting submarine attacks. But I would say radar, especially airborne radar, is a really big killer for the German submarines. And it's a thing which is consistently a killer for them from a remote internet service, because it allows the Swordfish and other aircraft to really track in on these things. Lionheart Extra. Every country likes to be the main world power. It's time to take responsibility of being world power. Yeah, that's trouble. We make a lot of jokes about being a world power, being a policeman, the world policeman, but that is basically what you are. And the world policeman might sound like fun, but you have to be the world policeman every single day. And that's not a lot of fun. Which is why I'm worried about the US withdrawing from the World Health Organization, these sort of things. I can understand why, but I'm not sure if withdrawing from it is the most sensible thing. I'm not sure. There again, the World Health Organization is, to a lot of arguments, broken at the moment, so maybe they reform something different. Maybe they create a new global health organization. And we'll have fights of GHO versus WHO recommendations. Huh, that'd be fun. Jack Ray, wow, that super chat appeared far faster here than on that UI which Dr. Clark is using. Yeah, more than likely. Steamlabs is fun. It's this France's fault. They're footing the bill. They own over 10% of European infrastructure. They only keep ports of Sri Lanka, Djibouti, and other key African ports. Yeah, there is. It's going to sound strange. You're footing the bill for infrastructure investments. That's lovely. You're doing that. But that isn't the same as providing world security. That isn't the same as maintaining ships and maintaining troops in regions of the world which you don't really have any financial interest in. But it's important to your allies that you provide security. It's getting into conflicts in the world which you have no real beef in because you have to try and sort it out. It's a very, very difficult business being world number one. Okay. Okay. All right then. Sadman, on the previous discussion of how to reform the army, it would be nice to emphasise the strike brigades, paras, get them some nice kit, deep fire sec, but chances are that they end up costing more. You see, that's the thing. If you're going to do this properly, you need to do it properly. Carmen, why don't you post a copied link into your video descriptions? I probably will start doing that. You have to remember, I've written most of these video descriptions a while back. I should start doing it properly. I'm getting more used to some of the software, and I'm getting more used to it as I go. Joyce, 1971. During World War I, the Royal Navy had their Lee Enfields taken for the Western Front and adopted a weird collection of firearms, including a Winchester lever guns. Why does the Navy need so many firearms? Boarding parties, shore parties, security of the ship when you're in port. Lots and lots of reasons you end up with firearms. Basically, if you consider the Boxer Rebellion, most of the rapid reaction units the British deployed were actually sections of the ship's crews. There are more Royal Navy officers who get promoted for action in land battles in the late 1800s, early 1900s than there are sea battles, of course. And, you know, Beatty and Jellicoe are classic examples of this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, getting responsibility for it's nice. I when people are helpful, I like to reward them. Jano, tribals or battles at Dr. Scott? There are going to be tribals, battles, black swans, all sort of. That's the sort of flotilla plans that coming through. Sadmiral, Dr. Clark, just out of curiosity, if the CVA-1s had proceeded and more funding was available through the 70s, what would you want to see a CVA-1 strike group look like, ship and airwise? I'd have hoped they'd have got 2 to 3 Type 82s and 2 to 3, well, possibly 3 to 4 Type 22s each, hopefully. And in the 70s, probably a squadron of Buccaneers, a squadron of Swordfish, a squadron of flight of Gannets, and a squadron of helicopters was probably what we were looking at. But, you might be lucky. You might get some... Eventually, you'd probably keep the Buccaneers in service. You might well replace the Phantoms with F-18s. And you might well replace Gannets possibly with Hawkeyes. Possibly. So you could have had some interesting aircraft come into service. You could have had some interesting stuff. But it would be, it's going to be an interesting strike group. It's going to be a mixture of depends on how much funding. Carl Garner, I don't think an F4 Phantom could have landed on a CVL. It's amazing what can land on your CVL when you want it to. When you want it to, you can do all sorts of things on your CVL. It depends how many arrestor cables and how you're prepared to set up the arrestor system. Danny Freeman, Dr. Clark, at Summer, a follow-up question. What would have CVA-1s have done to our Naval Aviation 1970 Spreaders? I don't think Harriers would have featured. I don't think Harriers would have been around as much. I think you'd be looking at a Fleet Air Arm which would have probably gone a similar route than the Americans in terms of F-18s. The British would probably been very involved in the F-18 project, so in the nicest way, the Joint Strike Fighter wouldn't have been such a new project for the British to get involved in, and probably you'd have had a lot more interesting sort of things in terms of that coming out. Mac, Nimitz liked to let his officers do the work, which was a good choice given that he was in control of the US officer course. To an extent, yeah. Jack Ray, is it just me, or is the F-35 way more costly than performance? The Vitol cost seems to be rather high. Vitol cost is always going to be rather high. It's always going to be high. It's complicated, and it's always going to be high. Strub, how did the RN advance enlisted members during World War II? Was it merit-based, time-based, or test-based? Okay. It could be time and test-based, i.e. you've completed the courses, you've served the time. That's the more generic route. But there is always a significant proportion in the Royal Navy in that it rewards merit and intelligence. In that if you show an aptitude, if you're good, especially when we're rapidly expanding forces, you get promoted. And they are good at that. So that does happen quite a lot. So it's a sort of mixture. Carl Harmon, have you got Disaster in the Far East 1940-42 by John Grigg and Martin Mace in that box? I do know, because I can see it looking at me right now. I haven't read it though, so it's in my new stuff box. Nighthand Production, why was Vanguard's bridge seeming such a departure leap forward compared to, say, GKG's or rebuilt Queen's? Because... Sorry, Furry Kid and I have just seen your message, and I am going to... Same reason as I didn't let through the earlier one from someone else. My little cousins are watching this. That one's not going through. My aunt would kill me. So... Why was Vanguard's bridge seemingly such a departure leap forward compared to KGV's or rebuilt Q's? It's not really. It's not such a departure when you consider its war experience plus line design. I think that's lines, not line design. Yeah, lines. The big cat. Basically the destroy the big battleships they're sort of looking at. It develops from them. It's designed in many ways because the battleships now appreciated that they're going to be... If they're going to be used at all for anything, it's going to be for sure bombardment, maybe for fleet actions, but very unlikely. Mostly they're going to be command assets, and they need to be command assets, and that changes how you're looking at your bridge. Sean Mack, Bryn would have probably been in a better position if they'd loaned Nimitz the carriers for Midway. Possibly. That would have been kind of interesting if Britain had done that. But honestly, they're using the carriers for other things. But if Victorious had been around that much earlier, then the USN could have had a far more fun with aircraft carriers at Midway. Daniel Freeman, Dr. Clark, Admiral, maybe Phantom and F-14s, ditch Tornado for F-14s for RF2? I doubt it. F-14s wouldn't have been ditched. Tornadoes wouldn't have been ditched. The Tornadoes were a joint project which were keeping British jobs going, so they would never have been ditched. It's F-18s rather than after Phantoms, probably. Sharmak, Nimitz wouldn't have asked if they couldn't have happened. It could have happened from the American perspective, but from the British perspective it couldn't, because in the nicest way there were British operations going on. This is the thing. The war is not happening in isolation. The Royal Navy's not sitting there going around, you need some carriers. Well, we're not using ours. Ours are in use. So Nimitz asked for them, but we couldn't really send them at that time. And also then they insisted on doing all sorts of things to HMS Victorious before she arrived. They wanted to make some modifications to her, and it's silly, because they wanted to basically Americanize her. And it didn't really work that well. Ron Marsh, if the UK defence budget suffers post due to COVID-19, what do you think is most likely to be affected, and where do you think any delays or cuts will be least painful? I have a feeling if anything gets affected, it'll probably be the budgets which they can hide. So you're looking at the logistics, the training, and those areas, and they can all be painful. I have a feeling they're not going to want to hit a big ticket item because they're not going to want to look like they're retreating, especially not with Brexit and global Britain. So they're going to want to look, engaging to the world. They might try and delay a frigate project, or a strike will probably suffer. But, it'll be nothing that's been announced. So if I was the armed forces, I would be announcing stuff as quickly as I could to get it out there. Possibly Challenger 2 might even be cut. They might take a tank gap, because they might say, we can't upgrade it, it's not useful at the moment, but we will get new tanks, or something like that. They did it with aircraft carriers, they might do it with tanks. I hope they don't, though. I hope they don't. Because when you need a main battle tank, you really need a main battle tank. You don't always need a main battle tank, but when you do, you really need one. It's like an aircraft carrier. When you need one, you really need one. This Francois, and in the long distant future, when the Queen passes, it's strongly believed that household cavalry will be dissolved. I doubt it. Politicians like parades as much as the royalty. They're not going to let them get cavalry go. Oh, good lord. Do you know how cool they look on parade? Seriously, the British Army often, and many times in history, has had more horses than tanks, and I think they do currently. Sure, Matt, I don't think getting better tanks is just like the British version of getting new Amtrak submarines. Yeah. Night Heron Productions. In one of those very unlikely scenarios, how would an early Avro Shackleton variant in numbers have done in the Battle of the Atlantic? It would have been blooming useful. Having a nice long-range aircraft like that would have been very, very useful. But, you know, you have the Bomber Command going, we want all the long-range bomber aircraft, and they do quite well. Seeing what European correspondents in the USA Civil War, London Times, gave shocking news that the US literacy rate was over 90%, and even Confederates was 75%. Rocked Euro's view of the Yanks. It did. It was probably wrong, but it would rock their views. Sure, Mac, what is China going to do with India and Pakistan that are each other's throat again? Probably have a nightmare. Probably try, you see, the thing is, in that scenario, they probably try and take advantage of it to increase their own position, which is the exactly wrong thing as well, number one, you want to do, because that will start a war. So, you know, they're involved there, so it's just one of many scenarios, which is the problem for them becoming world number one. Trent Talaka. Second try. What are your thoughts on the recent proposal to put an SM-6 missiles on F-18E? SM-6 standard missiles. I think that is very, very disturbing. I've seen lots of ideas for it, and I really don't think that it's probably the sensible idea. I think it's an idea which people go for, but I don't think it's a sensible idea. You have a ship-launched missile for a reason, and you have an air-launched missile for a reason, and there are differences. Plus, there are lots of existing long-range aircraft, air-to-air missiles. Just going to look up my favourite one's name so I get it right. Available. Myself, if I was going for it, I'd be going for a Meteor. That's the best one available at the moment. The US Navy used to have some excellent missiles. Used to have some excellent ones from the F-14, but the Meteor are far easier. Go for an off-the-shelf option. Don't try and develop something which is not going to fit it, and it's just going to make it terrible. Jay Illingworth, I have to report on an absolute disaster. Amazon reports they have to cancel my delivery of Iron Brew because of the problem with the package. Oh, good God, you poor thing. That's terrible. Bitron, the Trump administration is the 2nd Pacific Squadron led by the captain of Comanche. Policy by Twitter posts from ignore. Yeah, there's so many issues. So many issues. Jerish and Khartoum and Durham had RN officers, not to mention the Crimea War and Baklava. Yeah, there's so many times. The Royal Navy officers really like to get involved in things. Carl Harmon, at Dr. Clark, you should be the first Sea Lord in the Discord with Draken armoured carriers being simply named. Tempting, but I'd probably go with Third Sea Lord. You have more fun and get to go around shipyards and don't have to deal with the politicians quite so often. Kevin Taylor, just Clark, when are you going to do the video on folding aircraft wings on carriers? Might have the wrong channel, as it might be on Dracula's. It's going to be on mine. But we might do one on Drax. I'm not sure. But I am going to do a video about it. But, you know, as I said, it's different types. It's this one, this one, this one, and there's also this one, which is also a different one. There's all sorts of fun types to go through, and I will go through them. But it's having the time. It's been finishing off. Last 3 weeks has really turned into really pushing forward the book and rewriting and doing all sorts of things on the book to make sure it's up to the standard I want it to be on. Jack Ray Bishop, please don't try to start something unpleasant. Yeah, don't. There's no point getting too much into politics here. You know, in nicest way, my politics, if I'm going to admit, I'm sort of from the conservative side, the British conservative side of the spectrum. Sorry, but I am. But I would say, honestly, I can pick holes in pretty much everyone quite happily. Because there just seems to be not enough thought going into these things these days. I'm not sure why. There isn't. And I'm really against the amount of ideology which gets into politics these days. It's people are making decisions based on ideologies, not on facts, and it's just terrible. I prefer the times when in history when you had people making decisions based not on ideology but looking at the facts and going, my ideology is we're not going to use an ideology. Those days are long gone though now. It's all ideologies. Okay. Lionheart X-Ray. Jefferson, or how about many breaks? C-130s preferred to land some Sukhoi. Yes, they did. C-130s did. Lionheart X-Ray. Is there a reason I don't hear much love for British Navy planes in World War II other than the Swordfish? They're just not as well known. They really aren't as well known. And also, there is the fact that the Swordfish does outlive 2 of its successors. And when I say outlive, it completely annihilates them. Really does. Let's see, where's the book recommendation? Ooh. Sorry, just flash quickly into the Discord because of the messages. That's good. It's getting a bit disturbing there. We'll leave that for a bit. I'll sort it out later. Carhon, it's very interesting. Okay. Scene White. French kept US-made Corsair 2 as one of their main fighters. Also, pilots known last of the gunfighters. USN kept as light bombers, but best taken on small mix. They were good aircraft. Sure, Mac. We need the 16-inch autoloaders and flight deck because screw. Yeah, you can have that. Nighthand Production. Sorry to keep spamming with questions, but how many French experts note that the Fairey Delta II unit, us Brits threw away the chance to exploit the niche that the Mirages fit into? Yes, they did. But, you know, so many times this has been done. So many times the thing's been thrown away. And people make short-sighted decisions all the time. What last short-sighted in long term, but seem sensible in the short term. And so many decisions which have seemed sensible in the short term have turned out to be completely terrible in the long term. And so many decisions which, you know, it works both ways. Bishop, America's had free public grammar schools from its early days. Reading was seen as important for the Bible study and read newspapers, which got a low postal rate. Good education drove economic growth. Yep, true. Daniel Freeman, Stephen White, outsource maintenance of things like surplus tank ships act to amateur enthusiasts to save money. Oh, that'd be so tempting. I'd take a few ships on. I would. What I might do with them, though, is a different matter. You know, give me enough warships and I could have some fun. Some real fun. Ooh, explaining the folding wings looks like new exercise for naval history and naval fusers. Kevin Tank, yes, it is true. It's fun. Sure, Matt, gasp, you have different party affiliation than I can't listen to anything you say ever. I know. So many people are like that these days. I have some of my best friends are from different parties and different viewpoints. And I honestly cannot understand when people turn around to me and go, oh, I can't be friends with someone from this party or that party. And I work in universities, okay? So if I wasn't able to be friends with people of different political spectrums from me, I would have a never-ending trouble. I don't. My students don't mind. You know, you can be honest. You can go, look, that's not my view. My view is this. But guess what? I'm not here to teach you my view. I'm here to teach you history of engineering. And you can learn that from anyone. And it's good, Dave, isn't it? Stephanie Wilson, at Richard Hughes, I despair over the people voting them in. I would much rather listen to Clark talking ships and aircraft. I would much rather to talk to the ships and aircraft than politics. It's far more fun, far more interesting. Carl Norman, is it true that Britain and France plan to use their navies together to help escort capital ships? There are always plans out there for doing joint operations and joint task groups. And there is the fact that the Royal Navy is going to have 2 strike carriers and the French Navy is going to have 1. So therefore, the theoretical option is, you know, with 3, we can guarantee we have 1 available. However, the reality of this is often that in peacetime, not as much happens because everyone has needs for them. And then suddenly they try and produce it in wartime. And the trouble is, as a rule, when we've gone to war, Britain have often found the French reticent in coming forward. They can be very helpful in many ways, but they don't often like to commit themselves into the actual fighting. And you can understand that they have their own legitimate reasons, but it does mean that the Royal Navy has learnt to its experience not to get involved. Although the politicians still like signing the papers, so they do that. I have a feeling you're more likely to see, especially as the Type 26 is going to be shared between all the 3 of them, the Royal Australian Navy, the Royal Canadian Navy, and the Royal Navy working together in a major, and especially in a major war which involves all 3. I could certainly see them forming joint task groups, and I would say that that's a particular issue for the Chinese to think about in the South China Sea, because they are expecting to deal with the US Navy and expecting the RAN, I think, in their calculations to be very much passive or working with the US Navy. I think a Royal Navy carrier turning up with possibly Royal Canadian Navy and then added on Royal Australian Navy ships to form a Queen Elizabeth Canberra task group could be a very problematic scenario for them to deal with at the extent of their range and operations. Because they'll be focused on dealing with the Americans, because the Americans are the biggest threat. So therefore, your smaller threat can skip past. It's one of those scenarios. We've got this really big threat, so we have to ignore them. And then they end up doing a lot of damage because they can, because you ignore them, to the point at which you do have to focus on them. And that means you have to ignore the really big threat, or you lose forces to deal with them that you could be facing big threats that allows a big threat to do more damage. It becomes a catch-22 scenario. Night Heron production. If you can build the late 30s, early 40s British dive bomber, what optimal design would be looking for? Does Barracuda come up to specs, or is it still unlocking? A little bit slow, as I must have it. If I could rebuild the skewer, which is basically what I'd be doing, I would take the skewer and I would put in a more powerful engine. And that is what I would do, because the Skewer is already a very good dive bomber. It's slow, and it's, you know, these things. It could be it could have been a very, very good dive bomber if they'd been able to fit even a Merlin in it. Would have been an improvement, but certainly a Griffin or a Sabre could have been really, really good. Kevin Metallic, I've just seen the star folding, so I'm presuming somewhere there's a proper question, but I've missed a proper question. Showmac at Dr. Clark, it will be fine if we had 1.5 feet of deck armor and the speed of 30 plus knots. Everything's fine usually if you have 1.5, if you have 18 inches of deck armor. That sounds like a Tillman though. Can't. At Dr. Alistair Clark. Yeah, don't worry. I think that comes from the earlier question. Keeler 19. Wish more politicians would watch historians. It would make life a lot easier, certainly. But it tends to be people forget history until it does them interest, it serves them, and then they cherry pick from it. History is not something you can cherry pick from. You have to look at everything in context and look at the nuance of it. And there is often a lot of nuance and a lot of context which explains it. It's not a simple boom to boom. Vision. Would Brazil be better off spending dreadnought money on schools and railways? What type of navy would they have built in 1999? Just destroyers, subs, and cruisers, flagship? They could have. And honestly, putting more money on railways could have really helped Brazil in the 1920s and 30s. Kingsrook, game question. You mentioned playing Galactic Civilizations. Which ones? All of them. I've had 1, 2, and 3. 3 is my preferred one these days, but I still have 2 and 1 sitting up there. This is Brazil needed ships to counter Argentinian Chile ships. Well, that is why they had the dreadnoughts, yes, but, you know, honestly, they only need them if they're actually going to fight a war. If they're not fighting a war, then they can get away with it. But actually, they could probably go with it with a decent cruiser arm and a decent submarine arm, because any major war in South America, the Royal Navy's probably going to get involved. And as long as you're friends with them, they're probably going to look after you. Shomak, no one sensible put in as much faith in having French Navy as British did during World War II, because we've seen what happened there. Yeah, and also the Royal Navy didn't put as much faith in the French Navy as we'd like to think we did. It's one of those things, and I will get onto this because the 80th anniversary of Mirza Kabir is coming up, and I'm going to probably get a lot of French people very upset with me because I'm going to say this now. A, that was justified. B, did you really expect the British to let the Germans probably gain a huge naval force that easily? And C, do you really think the plans for Mirza Kabir had not been already been looked at and worked on for years in advance? We're talking about a nation which had a government parliamentary committee entitled the Harbour Attack Committee. Do you really think Mirza Kabir wasn't one of the harbours which was looked at? You look at all of them. You don't want to fight them. You don't want to do it, you know, but you do it. You have a look at them all. Kevin Metallic, wait, Canada's Navy, but they're so nice. I also thought their entire Navy considered icebreakers. No, I think you're probably joking, but I would also suggest that the Royal Canadian Navy in World War II, with their tribal class destroyers, really do live up to the aggressive reputation of the tribal class, and they really do like to find their opponents. Banholm, given that the British Army has had so many close ties to the Danish Army in the last decades, would you think it being likely that somehow something similar happened with the navies? The Danish Navy, the Netherlands and the Danish navies have a lot of ties with the Royal Navy. They have a lot of connections. Strub, when did the dive bomber stop being a major part of the strike package? Once you stop needing a dive bomber to hit a target accurately. Once you got better bomb sights and you could do it without the diving, that made things a lot easier. SMPI, where would the Indian Navy be in the hypothetical China versus Western Navy standoff? Theoretically neutral, practically, I think they'd be behind the Western navies. Honestly, especially with what China's doing in the north of India at the moment, I think you would find the Indian Navy quite happily forming up behind them. Calhoun, I can see it possibly being an RN, RCN, and who knows, maybe the Indians might want to join us just to make a nice force. Yeah, that is the interesting thing, of course. If you get an Indian carrier along with the Queen Elizabeth and Canberra, then you have even more fun coming the Chinese way. To transform, regarding modern French armed forces, they're basically been fighting non-stop in Africa, and that occupies most of their attentional resources. Yeah, it does. Nick Waters, does Canada, Australia, UK have similar ship types, making exchanges more or less frequent? It will make them more likely, and definitely, as you said, especially in early years of class. Bishon, great leaders have been historians, including Theodore Roosevelt and Winston Churchill. Yeah. Oh, Winston Churchill is sort of more of a passionate historian. Historian by passion. Roosevelt is one by training. And this really, really is a historian. Genevieve at Calhoun, he was the French Admiral Mirza Kabir, and furious to accept choice given by Somerville, resulting in a fight the French lost and haven't forgotten. Yes, but he wasn't really given the full range of options, which basically Somerville sends them through the proper channels, and the full options do not get passed on to him, and that leads to his decisions in the case of the Admiral in Mirza Kabir. But you know, it's life. It's not really a good scenario for anyone. Somerville certainly doesn't like it. Richard Manoff, you always plan for all contingencies. If you don't, you're idiotic, and the RN is not idiotic most of the time. Exactly. It's like, why did the USN and the RN have plans for going to war against each other? Not because they thought it was a high likelihood, but because you have a plan for it, because they're next most powerful, then they have a powerful navies, and that's one of your worst case scenarios. Do you like the ruler class? I presume you're talking about the wave ruler class? Oh, let me just check, because there might be another ruler class which I don't know about. I doubt it. So I'm presuming you're talking about the wave rulers. Escort carriers. Oh yeah, them. They're nice ships. I was actually writing about HMS Shah this afternoon. I forgot to do a ruler class. Yeah, they work. You know, escort carriers often get a bad reputation because they're bare bones, but I can honestly see them becoming a feature of future wars if those wars don't go nuclear. I can see them becoming a feature because you're going to need to expand your aviation provision. I can honestly think that the future ones will probably be carrying mostly unmanned aviation, but I can see them being used again. Definitely. Jack Ray, do all navies like UK and US practice cooperative logistics operations? Theoretically, everyone in NATO does, but, you know, theoretically, everyone in NATO does. Not always as well. Yickers, SNPI, would the Navy and the Indians prefer to work with the RN or the Americans in the task force? I could see politically there might be issues with a Royal Navy admiral being in charge of the task force, but I have a feeling the Indians would probably accept it as long as they had the second in command, because that would be the scenario they probably get. Because especially if you've got the Royal Australian Navy and the Royal Canadian Navy showing up, and you've got the Royal Navy showing up their carrier and all these things, if they've already agreed that there's going to be a Royal Navy admiral in charge, which probably they would do, because the Royal Navy would probably be showing up with Type 45s as well as Type 26s, Type 31s, so providing a very heavy strike acid and probably astute class submarine, so probably would get the task force commander. The Indians would probably join in, but the Indians might well put together their own task force, which they probably could do. So it might be sort of more a case of we're cooperating as we've got our own task forces. So instead of them being directly under command, they're a cooperating task force scenario rather than being under each other's command and operating under the US theatre commander. It'll probably work like that. Nighthare production. If the French units in Mesocampbell, along with the 2 Riclos just for fun, had come out and joined the RN and become Free French Fleet, how do you see them being utilised? Basically, as they were already being utilised as part of the force, and certainly they would strengthen up the Ally. They would certainly have been used to strengthen up either the Mediterranean Fleet. Probably they've been inserted as small groups variously around the fleet. And what's interesting is the French units in Alexandria and these sort of things, that they'd have been moved around the force and used to support things. Basically they've made things easier for the Royal Navy to spread out. Nick Waters, I remember a TV documentary maybe 10 years back where UK carrier was doing replenishment at sea of the US and they didn't communicate with each other well. 10 years back. I don't think the Royal Navy had an aircraft carrier 10 years back. They didn't, actually, no. It was in the middle of the 2010 defense SDSR, which got rid of them. But sometimes replenishment at sea doesn't always work well. It's quite a difficult process. It can be very difficult, even when you are well practiced. Nighthare Productions. In a future war with China, would it be likely to expect North Korea to join in, given that without China, North Korea functioning would be pretty much... yeah. Possibly they would, but it could be that could be more of a problem for North Korea, for China to deal with, because then they have to support them, and then they won't have any chance of having a neutral South Korea. A neutral South Korea would be helpful because the Japanese and the South Korean navies are pretty powerful. So if you can keep one of them neutral, then that saves you a lot of trouble. Sure, Mac. Combustible, vulnerable, expendable. CVs aren't necessarily vulnerable or expendable, or combustible. The British did a lot of modifications on theirs to make them more survivable, and they were fairly survivable. They did fairly well. They sound they sound like they'd be terrible. They actually work quite well. SMPR, I would assume that Commonwealth navies and navies that spun off the RM would have similar operational methods. They do in some extent, but the Royal Indian Navy has a slightly different approach to things. Richard Mayer, escort carriers are small enough so you don't put all your eggs in one basket. Yeah, that is always the advantage of them. Bitchram, could the situation in Hong Kong reach a point where the US Navy and Royal Navy undertake a refugee rescue operation like the boat people after Vietnam War? Doubtful. There's all sorts of issues with that. I think what the British have done, which is basically grant almost complete freedom to 3 million Hong Kongers to come to the UK, is the biggest risk for the Chinese, because that means pretty much anyone who goes abroad can get to Britain. So you either have to stop everyone going abroad, or you can't, or you have to be at risk that anyone can do.
Disgruntled. Branches of the same military have issues working with each other at times. It's not great, and not enough money to run mass exercises. It's quite an issue, yeah. King's Rook. The RCN is a weird hybrid of US-UK operations. Yes, they are, as is the Iran. That's fun. They get involved in everything. See what? Not well known is a US Vin and Victory Parade of the armies of the Civil War and on a Cumberland 2-day event. Both large veteran armies get. Yeah, they do. You know, it's the thing is you have these armies, but most of the British weren't fairly that worried about the American army post the Civil War because they couldn't really get anywhere. They might try and invade Canada, but the British were fairly sure that they could deal with that because Canada is not a good place to invade. Canada has a lot of hills, and yes, it has flat areas, but it has a lot of hills, a lot of country which can soak up invading armies quite well. And you have a lot of Canadians who are very good and very patriotic. So, you know, yes, you might have a very experienced army, but the foe they'd be fighting be very different. And of course, the British would have a lot of supplies coming in, unlike of course, the Confederates. Peter Eskley, would a modern escort carrier be nuclear powered? Nope. That's easy enough. No. Just no. Richard Mayoff, the last American president who really saw things in a national way was Bush in 1941, and it cost him the election because of the ideological Republicans. Yep. Kingsroot, a modern escort carrier is a helicopter carrier of the French Spanish name. No, they're modern light carriers. They're CVLs more than anything. No. Escort carrier, you're looking at not anything that's in production. Basically, your closest equivalent to one escort carrier is a Bay class LSD, which is a logistics ship in the Royal Navy. But, you know, it's basically a landing platform dock, but it's done down to civilian standards for logistics support operations. You'd be doing something similar, but with a completely flat flight deck for carrier ops. Right, I'll be back in a second. Hearing more noises about tea. Keep hearing noises about tea and they're not being delivered tea. It's terrible. Hungry. So. US Army, the US Army quickly shrank not too much after the American Civil War, and equipment became obsolete. Yeah, pretty much it disappeared almost. Carl Harmon. Is there a difference in equipment required for war with Russia, China, or North Korea? Not really. It's scale and placement of the equipment. It's logistics and infrastructure for it. That's more of the issue. It's a case of, yes, we can have a war with Russia, we can have a war with China, we can have a war with North Korea, but how much equipment are you going to need, where are you going to need it, how's it going to operate is going to be slightly different, but it's the same equipment, broadly speaking, you're going to need. As I said, Kevin Target, does the US have escort carriers still? No. They have. It isn't weird to have super carriers and escort carriers,
But it is probably weird in peacetime to have supercarriers and escort carriers, because people go, oh, you can build a carrier for this much. Why are you building a supercarrier? Well, because we need a supercarrier for the actual warfighting, the escort carriers for the secondary roles and the auxiliary roles. Which use I am, but I have plenty of iron brew left, so I will keep drinking. Okay. Ooh. Sure, Mac, probably would have been a Free French force in New Caledonia because of the call. Yeah, more than likely. Scrub, why do Destroyer Escort and CV always look down on, even if they both serve distinction? Because people like to look down on bare bones and basic. Because it looks better to look down on bare bones and basic. And I will not point to certain historians who do it, because it's a good way to go, well, this is why we have to justify spending money on these super things. And I agree, it's very easy to do. It's a very easy case to make. And it's a very easy case to make, oh, this basics thing isn't as good as this. And it's true. If peacetime, if you've got a limited budget, and because they take so much longer to build, you have to build the premium items. Because largely, what you're going to finish a war with is going to be whatever's left over of the premium items you started the war with. So your fleet carriers, your major units, all these things, what you start the war with and what you finish the war with is probably going to be what of them you've got left. These smaller units, these cheap units, are what are going to be have to be quickly built. And they are going to be as survivable as they can be made, but they are going to be quickly built. Nick Water, sorry, a bit more on 10 years. Art class tour before retirement? Probs were about hand signal conventions. More than likely. Sometimes hand signals get a bit different. Furry Kitten, given that the more advanced nature of subs ASW in a future war with CCP, how would you reckon the Astutes would fare against a mobilised CCP Air Force? Astutes alone, that is. Astutes would do fairly well. Astutes are freaking lethal. You know, the British have really put it, especially the next batch of them, they are very, very good. Samuel, what about a modern CV basically being container or tanker ship converted to RFA like standards, basically just be a platform for Merlins and Wildcats to defend sea lanes? Probably you could do that quite easily. You could really do that quite easily. Kingsrook, General Winter doesn't just work for Russia. No, he also works for Canada quite well. Ooh. Yickers. Dr. S. Clark, Torpedo Run by Douglas Freeman is the fiction book about MTBs in Black Sea. Ooh, that's good. Daniel Freeman, I'd say modern CV is an ASW frigate with a couple of helicopters. I'd say a frigate is a modern frigate. I'm sorry. An ASW CV is going to be different. Jeff Beeler, Atlantic Conveyor was an escort carrier. By that ground, she is, yes. Although she couldn't really land, she could with the vertical system, so yeah. Yeah. This France rule. The American Civil War armies were still looked down on. Europeans liked their generals, but found that officers still had issues controlling the men. Yes and no. You can always find people who will say this, but when you're talking to the pragmatic people who really would have commanded in wars, not just being the ones who look good and dashing and were sent off to get themselves killed, probably. Yeah, there's a different perspective. Veteran, Canada had war plans to invade US up to World War II, taking border cities with their ports and railway junctions, Seattle, Twin Cities, Detroit, Portland, Maine. If I was Canada, I'd still have plans to invade America post World War II. It's just a practical thing to have. SMP. SN Pi, wouldn't replacing the majority of the aircraft on a modern aircraft carrier with UCAVs make more economic sense, as you can then have similar investment in strike package? If you have the aircraft ready. And please don't take this the wrong way, but this is a pet peeve of mine, because I teach aero students.
Aircraft is its own multiple. I'm not picking you up because I have seen this a lot. There is no such word as aircrafts. You can have multiple craft or a singular craft. Craft is both singular and multiple. There is no need to put an S afterwards. And I spend half my life correcting students about this because there is some vague area of Twitter or the world where it happens and it doesn't need to. And I see it in some newspapers all the time and it winds me up like anything. Because it's like craft, and you can have multiple seaborne craft. We're getting off the landing craft. There's not landing crafts, just landing craft. It's like aircraft rather than aircraft. So you can have 6 aircraft or 1 aircraft. You don't need it's never S. Sadly enough, would make more sense possibly, but it doesn't. Yeah. Richard Maynoff, what do you think the Nazis would have done if the French Navy had agreed to move to America rather than what happened? They would have been really, really annoyed with Vichy France. Completely annoyed. I can understand why the Vichy didn't want it to happen, because that would have been annoying. Sure, Mac, but smaller is so much cheaper. That's what matters, right? That's what some people think. Definitely, that's the argument you have to face. Yickers, favourite shipboard helicopter of any nation? Merlins. I'm sorry, I just like them. They are good anti-submarine. They are fairly good troop transports. They are going to be a good airborne early warning. If you're going to have a helicopter, you might as well go with them. In the Spanish Civil War, American War, the U.S. Army faced weapons invented by the Americans, including Hero Maxim machine gun, that the U.S. Army turned down for using too much ammo. Yeah, it was fun. Because for me, it has to be the Lynx. I can understand that. Lynx is very good, especially the new Super Lynx. But no, I'm going with Merlin. Minority Productions. I know China still has one Soviet-designed Gulf-class SSB still in commission as a testing vessel for ballistic missiles, but does North Korea have one, or was that just a rumour? They have something. They claim it works. We're not sure. This France was Sean, more or less true. It did improve. It did mean that light infantry was good, as well as raiding cavalry. I remember commentary of the battles being examples of Napoleonic warfare. There are lots of weird stuff that's said about the American Civil War, but it's, the one of the most favourites is when they start comparing to Napoleonic War and you go, yeah, but things have moved on a bit since Napoleon. These battles are a bit bigger than even Napoleon managed. Fury Kitten and Mirza Kabir, what would have happened if the Merchant Navy had been expecting Marine Nationale had been expecting the RN and fought back? What would have been the anticipated losses? If they'd been at sea, so in a position to fight back, it would have been interesting. I don't know if there would have been much losses because the Royal Navy did deploy fairly equivalent overwhelming force, and it would depend on the rules of engagement the French were pursuing, and that would have been all-out war. So it would have been losses, but I don't know how much. Plus the British did bring an aircraft carrier and various other things along with them. Carl Harmon, any idea when your book will be released roughly? December, hopefully. Possibly November. Kings, recommended subs for Canada. Oh, if you're going non-nuclear, you gotta go Japanese. If you're Canada at the moment, that's what you gotta go. Go look at the Japanese ones. If you're going nuclear, you can't import nuclear. You might be able to get them off the Americans. You might be able to get some Virginias off the Americans, but no, probably you'd have to go to the Japanese for their SSKs. If you could you get the British Astutes because they suit the Canadian way of war much better, but you couldn't get nuclears, so it'll be Japanese SSKs. Soyuz, probably. or some derivative of them. Kevin Tickles at Dr. Clark, why are ships painted grey instead of dark blue on top and grey on the bottom to camouflage the ship from satellites? Because the seas aren't blue. It's a thing of that they've been painted grey for a long time, but actually grey does blend in better at range. It just does. And honestly, satellites, photo reconnaissance satellites, aren't really what we use to try and track ships. There's a reason why they're called ocean reconnaissance radar satellites, or ORSATs. They usually use a sort of radar system to try and track a man because it's just so big. If you try and do it by photographic, you've got a lot of problems. Nick Waters, does America class not have a well deck? Make them the dead end for the USMC? I know their code is different, but can't you just drop in for a wasp and use it the same way? America class, okay. The first two do not have well decks. The rest of them are going to have well decks. So you know that's life. Theoretically, you can use them the same way as the wasps. Liberty Strub, the Liberty ships, ugly duckling or lifesaver? Ooh, lifesaver. But I prefer the Victory ships myself. Peter Exley, how much would it cost to convert a ship to a carrier compared to a purpose-built carrier? It depends on what you want. If you're looking for a bare-bones escort carrier, probably not that much. But the moment you're talking about trying to build in the equivalency of a proper modern aircraft carrier, it's probably going to cost more than actually building a modern aircraft carrier. That's the thing. What do you want to do? What are you going to have to do to the hull? What are you going to have to do to the ship? That's what the costs are. What equipment are you going to put in there? Yickers, just a terrible thing to have to lost the sailor on the class, bring it over from UK. Yeah, the unicorns turning to the upholder class turning to Victoria's is there's an interesting scenario. Yickers, a failure to plan is a plan to fail, and it seems the Arthurian didn't plan well with the Victoria class purchase and then retrofit and then use. They actually bought a good class, which the Royal Navy had used very well, and they had a lot of life left in them. And then they did modifications to them. And the trouble is, you're building... The Royal Navy ones were really quite high-end, which were built at the tail end of the RN using SSKs. So the RN was drawing from a lot of SSK experience. The RCN were trying to rebuild SSK and experience from 0 to maximum, and that's what happened. Yeah, for Canada, subs do make sense. You do need that sea denial capability. It's something which you're facing off against Russia, especially in the high Arctic. You need that facility. You need that capability of submarines. Bitron, US Army had not improved by World War I. Forces in France were equipped with French machine guns and tanks. Luckily for World War II, there was more planning, research, development. Kudos to General Marshall. Yeah, there's lots of stuff General Marshall does. It's fairly good. Carl Harmon, could Canada order a modification of the Astutes to allow them to operate them without them being nuclear? That's a lot of modifications. To turn a nuclear sub into an SSK is very, very costly and very complicated, as the Australians are finding out, because that's what the French basically offered them. Richard Manoff, what about the German subs that the Israelis seem to like? Okay, so here's the thing. If you are looking at the Mediterranean or possibly the Red Sea and maybe the Gulf, I would go with the Germans because they're the smaller submarines and they are designed for the Baltic and sort of operations like that, maybe going into the North Sea. If you're looking at open Atlantic,
or Pacific, or Arctic, you want an ocean-going submarine. So that's your Japanese ones. They're your two schools, big production facilities of SSKs, right? You have the German one, and you have the Japanese one. The Australians, for largely political reasons, didn't want to go the Japanese route, so they've gone the French route, which is a nuclear submarine converted to diesel system, which is causing all sorts of fun for them. They have certainly fun systems, and maybe it'll produce a good ship. Maybe it will do, in which case the RCN might well follow them. But honestly, I would have gone Japanese for being able to deliver on time and on budget. Night Productions, can we one day get your favourite maritime-related movies? Mine still Hunt for Red October. I don't care if there's no Scottish part of the Soviet Union. Sean Connery going there. Yeah, I can do that one day. Nick Waters, in ignoring politics of what you're allowed to buy, you take Syria over the German, Spanish, French, Russian, Swedish subs. Any particular strengths? I would be buying 8 to 10 of them if I was Canada. I'd want to have equal squadrons either side, because it just makes sense. Kingsrick, Duran ordered non-French books. Yes, they did. And honestly, I don't like the Spanish subs. I do not like the Spanish subs. The Swedish ones are usually good, but again, usually very small production lines. The Soryus are good for deep water operations and for having to deal with long ranges. Sonomac, you really all sat to use radar, you would have a thing. You do not want to know how often I have that conversation. I had this huge... I had to pull up the literal schematics of ocean reconnaissance satellites not that long back with a group of people who really should have known better to explain how ocean reconnaissance satellites work and why they can be spoofed. And they were going, but, and one was literally sitting there trying to tell me that they could photograph the entire Pacific from one satellite in 30 seconds and spot where every ship was. And I was going, no, it doesn't work like that, and no. Oh, joy of days. Kevin, what happened to Victory and Liberty ships after World War II? How many miles voyages were expected to make? Many thousands of miles. Most were sold to merchants. Most were sold to various merchant concerns and private concerns. And I think some were operating quite happily into the 1990s, honestly. I don't think they disappeared that quickly. I think there possibly are still, as it is fanciful, I think there's still some Liberty ships still loose. I think there might still be. Bitchin, how stealthy is a modern stealth ship from orbit? Do they use infrared to pick up heat signatures? Okay, picking up the heat signatures of a ship is also very, very difficult. They are quite big and quite good at hiding them. They do try it though. And how stealthy is a modern ship from orbit? Well, exactly as I say, if you're a radar deflecting ship, and this is the thing, if you consider the Type 45s, the LCS, Arleigh-Burkes, all them are designed with radar reducing signatures, it reduces your return on a satellite return as well, so it does make things interesting. I think a Type 23 is known to look to send the same radar return to a satellite as a small fishing boat. And actually, this has actually possibly caused a small problem because it was pointed out. This was someone made a theoretical joke to me that actually the thing was it came back as such a small fishing boat. You'd immediately ask, why is such a small ship so far out at sea? But leaving that to one side, it's easy to miss. King's for reference, are you referring to the Soryu class? Probably am. If I'm mispronouncing it, I do apologise. Sean Mack, for tier 3 naval powers, diesel boats are a must. It's very difficult to justify not having them. Yep, it is.
PDC, could we ever see a helicopter on a submarine? We could, but I doubt it. Maybe a UAV, but again, it's recovering and it's just not there. The moment you're getting into issues with them, so it's going to be a case of, can you develop a recoverable UAV which can go out of water in itself, come down and not reveal your position of your submarine? That's the issue. Strub, did the RN in World War II operate merchant cargo ships like the USN? If so, when were the RNs used instead of merchant crews? Royal Fleet Auxiliary, and yes, did quite a lot of that, especially during the more darker days of World War II, i.e., anything up to 1943. New IKB 4472. What are the laws about exporting nuclear power submarine ships? You can't. You're not allowed to. That's why Russia gets into trouble for India. Shulmac, Hunt for Red October is a terrible movie. So much of the book was left out. Yeah. I always would like to see Red Storm Rising turned into a movie, but I doubt that'll ever happen. Danny Freeman, re-SSKs. Aren't the South Koreans doing something interesting with their variants, home versions of the Type 212s? They are trying to do something interesting, but again, they're finding their problem there because they're basically trying to turn them into a Soryu class, but aren't actually managing it. Tis Franceville. Well, the UK has the merchant navy. They handle most of it. They did handle a lot of it, but the Royal Fleet Auxiliary was also there because they needed every ship they could to do it. Pete Exley, what is your opinion of the current Canadian subs Victoria class? I think I've carried them. When they originally upholder class, they're quite good subs. If they're well maintained, they can be used properly. The trouble is, they're also quite complicated subs. And if you're going to put all the stuff you have put into them, then that becomes a problem. King's Rook, I can see a reply to Jay Illingworth, but I'm not going to let it through. But, I can understand what's going on there. Be nice, Jay. Be nice, King's Rook. Tis Franceville. I don't know if you missed or skipped. I probably missed it, but ask him. How do you think the Turkish Navy will develop? Personally, I think it has a few options. It does have a few options, but remember, it's rather like the Russian Navy. It's limited. In fact, it's limited by the fact that it has to get out through the Mediterranean, and it has to deal with Greece and all sorts of other things on its doorstep. So, plus Russia and the Black Sea. So, in a way, the Turkish Navy has to have both a Mediterranean force and a Mediterranean force, a Straits force, and a Black Sea force, and it has to adapt for all three. And I think that's a major problem. I think that's why it's going to continue to pursue a very escort-heavy approach, very short, unlikely to have a large auxiliary. Might well go for LHDs, as they are already building them, and I think they're going to be useful, but I don't think they'll be sort of carriers. I think it'll sort of stay as a sort of light blue / green water navy. Not really a dark blue navy, because I don't think they need to be for what they're looking at. Hurricane, wouldn't it not be better to look for green absorption from plankton disturbance? Possibly. They are looking into it, trust me. There is lots of things about using weather satellites and all those sort of things to watch for ships, trust me. They are looking at it. If they can get the computer programs to work, they will have it, and that's going to cause trouble for submarines. Brock Payne, Nighthawk Productions. The Russians had a closed cycle submarine pre-World War II, which later Quebec class was based on. Yeah, they had all sorts of things, the Russians, but they weren't really always that good in terms of organising. Brock Payne, Red Storm Rising will probably be a better miniseries. You are right. I'd love to see Netflix or someone do it properly, or Amazon do it properly. Probably would be Disney. Almost lost Iron Brew. That would have been terrible. Thankfully didn't. Ay, caramba. Distracted by questions. Nick Waters, RSR, that's the one where a Russian sub hides behind the wreck of the Achille Leo. Yeah. Daniel Freeman, at Dr. Clark, Red Storm Rising, Amazon or HBO miniseries? Oh, that would be good, yes, I said. Furrykin, how do you feel about a movie, The Bedford Incident? It's fairly accurate, but worrying. It's one of those scenarios. Danny Freeman, read limited options for SSKs. Who would have thought it was difficult to design good ships for such conditions? It's bad enough to stopping the sea killing you floating on top. Yeah, it is. Submarines are a tough one to get right, and you have to get them right, really well right. Strap, Doctor, what are your thoughts on the ESN Pegasus class hydrofoils? Okay, basically it's an attempt to make something really, really rapid in deployment in its sort of attack pattern, and it's sort of a really fast attack craft. The trouble is with those things is they are very good at going very fast, but there's a lot of issues where they can problems where they can get into, and they're not really. It's kind of like stealth, the stealth of the F-35B. It's a one-trick pony. And if it hasn't got out of speed, it's then in a lot of trouble. If it hasn't got out stealth, it's then in a lot of trouble. And that's what I worry about them. Unless it's the Vistal F-35B, then it's tricky, as it's the Vistal aircraft and it's got stealth. And even if it loses the stealth option, it's still the only Vistal aircraft available, so it's still useful. Jay Richardson, why did hydrofoils ever fall out of favour? Because you can't outrun missiles. Simon, like to visit that Greek armoured cruiser that was a major thorn in the side of the Turkish Navy. Most Greek armoured cruisers are a thorn in the side of the Turkish Navy. The Turkish and the Greeks do not get along. Which is strange, because they eat such similar food sometimes. But I'm leaving that to one side. What is the worst naval movie? There are so many. I mean, seriously, there are so many. I have big problems with Pearl Harbor, and quite a few more with the more recent Midway movie. I prefer the older Midway movie. The older Midway movie is good. The more recent one is a bit silly. Sure, Mike. Turkey has to deal with the Russians while also seeing to their alliance with the Greeks. Yeah. Greg Sarsi, just a reminder, glorious 1st of June tomorrow. Well, anniversary thereof. Yes, I know, it's the 1st of June. Way! And my book goes in. Hopefully, if I finish the writing on time. Jennifer, at King's Rook, you're probably right. Should I put a bullet in? SNPI, how are UUVs likely to be used by various navies? I think they're going to be, for probably the biggest navies, they're going to be mine sweeping, mine clearing, mine laying, and probably submarine force multipliers and anti-submarine warfare force multipliers. So they're going to be big problems for a lot of people. They're going to be an issue. But, you know, they're going to move around. Now, Nick Orders, now having thought of Iron Bruce scented fabric conditioner. Oh god, I'd buy that. See, I wish they were remixing the Bismarck movie. The black and white was a bit inaccurate and needed a bit of colour. Was it Vanguard use of the Bismarck scenes? I think it might have been. Carl Clark, if any modern RN ships could be preserved after their service finishes, what ship would you choose? Well, personally, I'd like HMS Montrose to be preserved because I associate her so much with my dad, but, and I say this with all due feeling, probably the one most deserving of saving is HMS Lancaster of the current Type 23s and the current ships, the current Royal Navy. Probably. Jerison, why do 104s never ever fall out of flavor? As I said, missiles. Disgruntled, the software issues. The unpleasurable issues that armed forces have to suffer. It's really good, I swear, once the computer software works. Yep. King's Rook. They apply to HMS yeah, probably. Tenfold, tell me, Penfold, your thoughts on the Visby class Swedish Navy. I like them. I always have. For the Swedish Navy, they make excellent little ships. Completely scary. I wouldn't like to be in a fight with them. But they do cool. King's Rook, ever watched The Wackiest Ship in the Army? Yes, I have. But, you know, that's a comedy movie. When they're a comedy, I tend to be far more forgiving of them having errors because they tend to have these errors in process of working for the comedy value. So it's a comedy movie. When you're making a serious, this is the historical dramatization of it, I realise you've got to make some sacrifices for the drama, but I wish you wouldn't make sacrifices like the basic command structure. Seriously. SPI, why did ground effect aircraft like the Caspian Sea ones not work as a good platform for landing craft? They did work as a good platform, but just not a great platform, and a very expensive one. That's the trouble sometimes. These things are too... these are great, but on paper, but they're so expensive. Do you really need them? The new IKB 4472, are there any reports of submarines on purposely landing on the seabed? There are always reports of submarines purposely landing on the seabed. They prefer not to, but they do they have sometimes. But if they do, then they have a problem because they can't really go anywhere. Oh. Yakos, rather random question. Dr. Flock, can you speak to a Russian aircraft completely jamming an Aegis USN DD in the Black Sea in 2019? I know the Russians claim they did. And from my own reading around and chatting with people about the event, the Russians certainly claim they did. In reality, no. The thing was, and you always have to remember this, the US Navy and the Royal Navy, when they're operating near Russia in peacetime, and I'm sure the Russians realize this, so I have no harms doing this, saying this, do not really operate at full strength. So that the Russians really don't know what the full strength is. So, you know, they jammed an Aegis Arleigh Burke. Did they? Did they really? Let's see. Furykin, if you had to remake The Cruel Sea, who could you select to replace Hawkins, Sinian, and Ireland? I'd like to get Robert Lindsay in there somewhere, mainly because he'd just be good. He'd just be good for the personality. I'm not sure. The trouble is, it's looking at the current actors and going, who am I going to use? Who can really do this role? Oh God, please no one suggest Hugh Grant. I can't really think of actors of the sort of British actors of that generation I'd want to use. I really want to see the Tom Hanks one though. And I hear it's on Apple, and I don't have Apple. Carl Harmon. Cat-19, there was a specialised sub with tracks on it to use for wiretapping. There still are specialised subs with sort of things on them for doing that, for wiretapping. Carl Harmon, do the Royal Navy and Norwegian Navy work together? Yes, they do. Quite a lot. Royal Navy and Royal Marines still go up and practice in Norway pretty much yearly. Vision, I prefer old Midway movie too, but new movie did get AAM right. Yeah, the ships were grouped too close when it came battle. Yeah, they have all sorts of issues. Potter, at Dr. Clark, if you were sent back in time and you had to be a Sea Lord, what would you be first, second, or third act? And what time would you choose? Honestly, the time period I know best is run up to World War II, and I wouldn't really want to get in Henderson's way, so I'd probably pick first Sea Lord so I could replace Chatfield and make sure the Royal Navy gets ready for World War II and really push through some of those changes. For starters, I would shoot whoever suggested a 14-inch gun for the KGVs, and I would put a 15-inch in them straight away, just to save my logistics. I don't care about the politics. I can understand that there are all sorts of political reasons for it, yes, but I would get rid of that one. And I would order more carriers and more tribals and a lot more other things. Basically, L90 would get built. Tony Penfold, my name's the new Type 31. Fearless, Furious, Formidable, Fire Drake, and Falkland. Yeah, could be a good one. Nick Grifford. But then it looks too much like a Hornblower reunion. I'm presuming you've suggested people. Jerish and Colin Firth, Lindsay. Yeah, I can understand it being, but honestly, Robert Lindsay just does it well. Robert Lindsay does it well. There are some very good ones out there. Carl Harmon, Alexander Clark. Opinion on the Sandown class. Do you think they will have their replacements designed soon? Well, I'm of the opinion that mine warfare is going to get further and further away. So what are you going to replace them with? Is it going to be a package put on a Type 31, like the LCS are theoretically working on, or is it going to be an actual dedicated ships, or is it going to be a combination of two? I have a feeling it's going to be a combination of two. I think you're going to have some dedicated minesweepers, and then you're going to have some ones which aren't. I think there's about another glassful. More I'm watching the time because I have to take the dog for a walk at 10 o'clock. That's more the thing. So the fluffy research assistant will probably come up here and complain if he doesn't get his walk at 10 o'clock. In fact, normally he gets his walk at 9:30, but he'll wait for a bit. Okay, just going to check on my tuna sandwich, which is supposed to be coming at some point, and I will then answer Jay Richardson's questions.
Right. So, let's see. What do you, Cherishin, what do you think of the Argentine conspiracy theories that there is a claim that HMS Invincible was sunk by Exocet? It rears its head every year. In the nicest way. Ships can't be built that quick. I can see why they want that conspiracy theory. It does make up for certain things, but A, that would be hundreds of crew who would have died under the scenarios they're suggesting. The British couldn't have hidden that. B, you can't hide building an extra ship. And C, no. Shomak, yes, generally when you're doing saber rattling like that, you have the minimum amount of stuff on because the stuff you're transmitting, the more data your opponents have. Yeah, pretty much that's the case of the joyous of things too. For the Russian overflight over the Aegis cruiser, Aegis Arlebuck, and Tis Francis. So Skynet, do you think it's a shame that satellites aren't dedicated to the military? They were originally. I still laugh that they were called Skynet. Mm-hmm. Strub, are the Suez and Panama Canals, St. Lawrence Seaway, soft targets that Welsh navies should do a better time protecting? Probably, but their own nations are responsible for protecting them mainly. But they would be an issue in wartime. It's like all these choke points. They're always an issue in wartime. Fury Kitten, if the Bureau of Ordnance had not gone down a magnetic data route on the Mark 14, but still had the other issues, how much would this have impacted early Pacific agents? Probably would have made things slightly more successful. You know, you can imagine a few more targets, even a mildly more successful torpedo has a far more helpful for operations, and it can skew some things the way they need them. New IKB 4472. Do you think the Americans will ever recommission the hours again, or they're too far gone? Too far gone. Yeah, it's not coming back. Not unless there's a really, really dramatically bad scenario. Jennifer at Dr. Clark, would you suggest that the 15-inch 15-inch 42 Mark 1 was probably the best naval gun of the 20th century based on results in 2 world wars? Of the large battleship guns, it's arguably yes, but in the nicest way, if you're calling the best gun, what are you setting as your metric? Are you wanting the biggest gun, the most reliable gun, the most used gun, in which case you've probably got the argument's probably between the 5-inch and the 4.5-inch in terms of which the best one of the 20th century, and I'd go 4.5 because that's my personal preference, but both those, they have strengths and weaknesses. Yickers, Dr. Clark, I have run out of a favourite shipboard aircraft. Maybe lol. What is your favourite float plane mounted on any ship, on a ship of any nation? Okay. Now this is the point where I can either be very patriotic and say certain things, or I can be not so patriotic. I do have a bit of a soft spot for the Arado 196, and the Italian ones are quite nice as well. Honestly, my favourite is usually the Supermarine Seagull. I like her. She's a nice design.
Bishran, Space Force Netflix TV show was hilarious for the first two episodes, but ran out of rocket fuel by episode 10. Yeah. What is the biggest meme in naval history? Second Pacific Squadron, I'm a Pole, HMS Conquest stealing the sonar that was specifically designed to detect it, or something else? I would go HMS Cossack bashing into Narvik Harbour going, here's Johnny. But, you know. Yes, you've sunk block ships. What I'll do is I'll just smash into them, sit on top of them, and start shooting you from on top of your block ships. Hello? Seriously, I'm surprised the Germans didn't have nightmares for months after dealing with them. Carl Hammond, Uncle Clark, TV question for you. What did you think of the last ship on Sky 1 and what class was it? I forget. It was a Arleigh Burke class, if I remember correctly, and it was quite a good story. But it wasn't technically the last ship because there was a Type 23 also wandering around it and all sorts of other things. Yickers, thank you on Dr. Clark. This has been such a fun sunny afternoon. I'm glad it's been a fun afternoon. And Kingsrook, yes, Nathan James is an Arleigh Burke. Bitron, any thoughts on Space Force? I haven't managed to watch it yet. Preceding 10 article comparing international waters, Antarctica, and space in legal terms of ownership and actions by governments. Yeah, the US Space Force is going to have fun. But the fact is, space, like the sea, most of its law hasn't been written yet. So what happens out there is going to be interesting. And you're not technically supposed to militarize space, but hey-ho, you're going to end up because everyone is going to. Because it's the high ground. And we always like to seek the high ground. KLO19, I live very close to the USS in New Jersey. I've been on a lot, and they're in great condition, but for public access, that to cut multiple interesting places and just all around, yeah, that's the problem. Nick Waters, at new IKB 4772, another story I heard was a carrier maintenance crew got told to go to a mothball carrier to rip out spares, and the thing looked brand new, just out of refit when mothballed. Yeah. Bye, Jay Richardson. Yeah, my own bundle of fluff as also is making noises. So. So, as my bundle of fluff is making noises, and I am going to have to take him for a walk for 10 o'clock, I'm going to say last 10 minutes, okay? Because also, I think I have been on now for 3 hours and 43 minutes. So we're almost getting to the full 4 hours. Oh, good lord. Jane, if your choice. If you're arming a battleship, the 15-inch seems to be the weapon of choice, as the design was never changed over the Superstrike. Yeah, if you're arming a battleship, it's the 15-inch is probably what I would go with, because honestly, it's also a balance of what you can take with you, and the stresses you're going to put on the ship, and how much are you really gaining for having the larger guns. You know, it's a case of, yes, the 16-inch is lovely, but does that offer enough advantages over the 15-inch to warrant it? If you have to pick between the two, yeah. Carl Harmon, yes, I'll probably be on Discord at some point. I usually am on Discord. Kingsrook, almost rivaling Drac for video length. Well, we similarly like to talk a lot. We do. Sure, Mac. I mean, is putting military recon in space, not militarizing, that's how it's like. Yep, look at World War I with aircraft. That's what they start off with, as reconnaissance assets. It's always a pleasure. Fairy Kitten, could you see a future Space Force battle with KEWs having the same issues as modifications of Dreadnought class fire control systems and adjusting the tactics? Ooh, possibly. Could be interesting. And the IKB 47, can we buy a doggy treadmill? No, Raleigh will not. The fluffy research assistant will not accept a doggy treadmill. I have suggested it to him in the past. It doesn't work. Richard Math, thank you. Yickers, looking forward to next video. Enjoy your tea and walk with the doggo. Yep. You. Come, we give you the subjects you did around, but well, that's what the Sunday afternoons are sort of really for, the QAs, and also except the in the week ones, where I have a topic which I've already done a video about, do discussions, and then open the floor. So it's kind of like a seminar session. Seminal. Just out of curiosity, how viable is it to replace the silver A50 VLS on the Type 50s, 45s with Mark 41 entirely, both on technical and political sense? In a technical sense, it's very easy and very, very viable. In a political sense, previous governments not so, but on the current one, you don't know. It depends how she's going. I don't think it will be the Mark 41, though. I think it'll be the Mark 53, which will be implemented, which could also be put in the same space. Night Heron, your commitment to your followers is commendable. Henderson will be proud. Which said, you can't sustain yourself with Ironbrew alone. I will do. I did have a nice lunch, so don't think I haven't had lunch. I had a chicken pasta lunch, so, you know. Anyway, Nicole Harman, opinion on the 100-year-old ship in the Russian Navy. Well, the Royal Navy has HMS Victory, so, you know, we all have our older members. Pod, I meant to ask this earlier, but what do you think of sea shanties? I know a fair number of people who actually sing them quite a lot, but myself, my singing, I strictly limit to random songs I make up to try and make people remember international relations memes. Hello, person who's just signed up, who ends in R88. Thank you to new subscribers. Steel Panther, who came up with the Naval Limitations Treaties, and what advantages did they seek? Oh, trees. Okay, well, basically the Royal Navy and the British were pushing them in many ways, and it was to save money. It was a way of trying to keep control on a budget. And basically, if you could get people to agree not to do something, then that meant it was something you didn't have to deal with. And you could engineer advantages in, which the British did with standard, the placement, and all those other things, to engineer an advantage for the British. So everyone else had to break the rules to get what they wanted. The British had rewritten the rules to get what they wanted. So the British had a lot of advantages in them. Ooh, yeah. Steam White, Super Shell for 16-inch 50 cal, £2,700, first 18-inch £3,000. They're all massive, but it's, you know, it's what you're going to do with it. Nighttime production. If you can have any modern ship not yet in production, pick a scale. What would you want? You see, I think they're in the, it's in this thing, but I probably want Type 26. I like the Type 26s. I'll be between Type 26s and Type 31s in a decent scale. I don't mind a decent scale, so I don't like little witty ones. I've always built, whenever I build ships, I build the bigger ones. I like bigger models, especially ones which are solid enough I can take into work with me and Charles and students and get them to think about things. Sean back. I've been playing Homeworld Remastered. My God, those games are good. Those games are quite fun on Homeworld One series, but you know, hey ho, haven't played one in a while. This France for how much Gibbon Southern do you know? Far too much. Can't have a room tour one day, like a tour of your video and research setup. Let's see how many bookcases you got. A lot. I would have to do a house tour for that. I'm not sure my mum would let me. Nighttime production. What's your budget? I have no budget at the moment. Everything's going on books. All right. Thank you for fun stream and good luck rewriting. Get in. Right. Yeah. So I am hearing the puppy dog making his case very much felt. So I'll be going down to him because, and I don't want him being too upset. Oh, see what my retirement gift was a 3-foot model of the USS Arizona. Oh, that sounds cool. That sounds lovely.
Jennifer, once again, your chat has been riveting. My regards to the fluffy research assistant. Yep, I look forward to the next episode as well. The next episode is on British and American British ships going into American harbours for their maintenance in World War II and how they had fun. I've basically, the video I'm planning on recording is, don't worry. The video I'm planning on doing to introduce it, the introduction, is going to look at 4 case studies, and then we'll just have a general chat on Tuesday. So that's going to be fun. Right. Take care, everyone. Thank you for staying. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you to the super chats. Thank you to the people who are patrons. Thank you to everyone who's helping out. And thank you to everyone who's on the Discord. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will go off and walk my puppy dog and sort out things. Good job I'm not planning on sleeping tonight, because my bed is kind of full of books. Right. Take care, everyone. Have a nice evening and hope you enjoyed. Sorry I haven't quite finished all the Iron Brew, but seeing as this is the second bottle, I am not too disappointed. I don't think I've cut you short. Take care, and yeah, deadline is going to be the fun thing. Take care, and